The doors be open. Of the day, ordre du jour.
Government orders, government bill, resuming debate at second reading on Bill C-68, an act to amend the Fisheries Act and other acts in consequence.
Reprise de débat.
Resuming debate. The Honourable Member for Saxville, Preston, Cheswick Cook. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I am going to share my time with the member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
To speak on the Bill 68, which is an act to amend the Fisheries Act. Before I get into the act itself, I do want to share a little bit with the House here. My riding has various communities that benefit directly from fisheries. And we have the Eastern Passage area, which is a very big community focused on fishing. And then we have other communities as we move down towards the eastern shore. So we have down in Seaforth, and then we down into Chesapeake, we see all kinds of various fishing taking place. Now, this is a very important act because we need to make sure that the corrections are in place, or the protection, if you want, of various, restore the protections that were cut. So back in 2012, of course, we know that the former government, the Conservative government, made some various cuts. And one wonders why those cuts were made. And it's obvious in the 3 years I've been here that the opposition party, the Conservative, had a lot of difficulty to balance between investment, the economy, and the environment, which is so crucial. So they moved forward to make those changes. And how did they make those changes? That's important, to know how they made the changes. Did they consult? Did they check with the fishers? Did they consult with the environmentalists? Did they consult with the various coastal areas, harbors? No. They put it right into an omnibus bill so that it was hidden. No consultation. We're just going to put it in there and slide it right through and make cuts to various protections for the fisheries. So who did it affect? As I said, it affected all those coastal communities, the environment, no opportunities to express themselves in any way, shape, or form. But this government, we took a different approach, a much different approach. We consulted with Canadians. All Canadians had the opportunity to participate in this consultation. We also had 2 round tables that Canadians could participate as well and offer their advice and suggestions and comments and share some of the key areas that they may have been concerned. So, Madam Speaker, on top of that, furthermore, our Minister of Fisheries requested or suggested to the Permanent Committee on Fisheries so that they could have various witnesses come in and share their opinions on this important topic. And this exercise allowed for 32 more recommendations that came forward. So all those consultation feedback from Canadians in various forums allowed the Minister and staff and government to put forward legislation that would solidly ensure that we are protecting our fisheries, that we have some standards and safeguards in place, but that we can also do business, which is crucial for our economy, of course. And we've invested money. We've invested over $284 million in that initiative. We've invested as well in the Ocean Supercluster. We've invested as well, Mr. Speaker, in the, I believe, the Ocean Protection Plan, $1.5 billion. And we've invested, of course, in the Atlantic Fisheries Fund, $325 million. So that's a clear indication. So, Monsieur le Président, je veux juste souligner que...
Mr. Speaker, I wish to emphasize that the previous government made were in line with other cuts that were made. For example, to weaken official languages communities.
Allow me to go back to the first point, which is the restoration of these protection, to ensure that we are protecting our fish, to ensure that we are protecting the fish habitats, which is crucial, to ensure that we are protecting the resource. That resource is precious and important to all Canadians, and we benefit through that resource, and we cannot afford to not protect that resource, which is, again, and I in the House not too long ago had a petition from my constituents, Blair Evis and Walter Regan, about the conservation funding for the partnership program, which is important to continue as well. Also in this legislation is some guidelines. So to issue permits, there has to be guidelines, and these guidelines are very important because if it's a major project, then you have to have a process, permit process. If it's a small project, then we would basically have a code of practice, if you want. And you know what this does, Mr. Speaker? This actually helps the industry, because the industry now knows there's a process in place, and if they're going to bid on projects, they know that these steps will need to be taken. Therefore, I have to put that in consideration when I put out bids. That's what's important. But that was not in place, Mr. Speaker, in the process. And when the minister considers issuing those permits as well, he has to consider what is the effect that will have on the fishing industry, on the habitat. And is there alternate ways that we could do these types of projects to ensure that we are, again, what the Conservatives never did, balancing between the economy and, of course, our resources and the environment. Crucial issue that the past government did not do. Also, the minister will be responsible to ensure that the fish stocks are not depleted. And if they are depleted, Mr. Speaker, then there has to be a plan in place to replenish that industry, because it is crucial. That's what it's all about, monitoring and making sure that we're safeguarding our resource, which is, again, crucial. And then to go further, Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have, Mr. Speaker? Because this is 3 minutes. So, Mr. Speaker, also, if we go a little further, to continue on the transparency that our government has put forward since the beginning, we now will have an official, if you want, public registry. And that public registry will show what are the plans in place to support and protect and safeguard our industry. So that will be public so people can see what plans, and they'll be able to give feedback on those plans. And that's what's crucial. And also, we will see inside those public registry, we'll see any permits that were issued and what conditions. And we'll also see, of course, which is very important, is any agreements that may have been signed between the federal government, the provinces, or the Indigenous people, Mr. Speaker, which is crucial. And again, I want to say there's a very important piece in this legislation about Indigenous people, about the Indigenous people's rights, which was not considered by past government, of course, in the last 10 years prior to us being here. So this is what open and transparent government will bring, and we have done that in many occasions, Mr. Speaker. We had of course, we also had the political financing, which was another very clear transparency legislation that we brought forward. Access to information as well. The mandate letters that were made public, they were made public so that people will have an opportunity to speak on those issues. So, Mr. Speaker, again, this act to amend the Fisheries Act is going to allow us to keep this fishery strong. But also, we will be able to ensure that the environment is safe for a long, long time. These are changes which were crucial, and I'm very proud of our government's commitment and our promise to move forward on this issue. And in only 2 years, we are here with this legislation, which is extremely important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merci beaucoup.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I almost feel sorry for our honourable member across the way, because I feel like he's almost been led to almost like a lamb to slaughter, because he gave us so much ammo on that speech. He spoke very eloquently, of course, but here we have a member that his family has benefited from a decision made by the Minister of Fisheries, where his brother, this member's brother, has just been given a lucrative surf clam quota valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. So when he talks about the government investing in fisheries, well, the government's invested in this member's family. When he talks about Indigenous rights and reconciliation, which is so important, his brother's bid had no First Nations involved until 3 weeks after the bid was announced, the winning bid was announced. I've got to ask, Mr. Speaker, through you, because he gave us so much, but I really would like to know how our honourable colleague feels that the process, how the process went, and perhaps in terms of the people in Grand Bank that are now going to lose their jobs, what his comments are to them on this whole process, because his family is definitely benefiting from the minister's corrupt decision. Thank you.
Honourable member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me a great opportunity, and he says there's a lot to talk about. There is, because they cut protection. Think about this. In year 2018, they cut protection of our fisheries and our habitats. That's unbelievable. And on top of that, their government was going to issue those licenses as well, and they were ignoring the Indigenous people because they didn't feel that they were important. But in our government, we are here for all Canadians and Indigenous people, and that's what we're doing, and we will continue to do that, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Vancouver, Kingsway.
Speaker, well, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his very eloquent and very loud speech. I want to ask a question about the West Coast. There's many British Columbians that are very concerned about open net fish farms that are on our oceans, and particularly those that are close to salmon migratory routes. We've had the Cohen Commission that looked at this matter in depth, and I'm not sure that those recommendations have been implemented by the previous government or by this government. And many British Columbians, I think many Canadians, want to make sure that we keep our coasts clean and we preserve the iconic wild salmon that are such an important part of our coast and our economy, as well as Indigenous culture. So I'd like to ask my honourable colleague what his opinion is, or what his government's opinion is, of my honourable colleague from Port Coquitlam, Port Moody, who has promoted the idea of moving open net ocean fish farms to closed containment systems inland so that we can make sure that we preserve our wild salmon and, in fact, all of the species that live on our iconic west coast.
The honourable member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the honourable member for his question. There's no question that these issues are very important issues, but our government has put forward an ocean protection plan with $1.5 billion. That's a major investment in our coastal waters. And he will find also that there's a part of that funding, $75 million, which is on the Coastal Restoration Fund, as well as the $64 million, which is focused on transportation, ports, and traffic. So and on top of that, I'd have to say that our government is working closely with the BC government about these issues, which are very important, and will continue to find ways in supporting the communities of BC and across Canada. Thank you.
Time for just one very short question and response. The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his speech. He spoke about reconciliation with Indigenous people. I know he doesn't have very much time, but I was wondering if, Mr. Speaker, if he'd expand on that and the importance to this government and what the previous government did on that particular subject.
The honourable member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And this question is a very important one, and we could speak about this all day long, because we know that the challenges of Indigenous people and their communities. It's been very, very challenging in education, health, and we as a government needs to do much, much more. And we have seen our government as we have taken many, many initiatives for water in 54, I believe, communities in the last 2 years. So there's many investments in housing to support them and health. So those are very important areas that we need to. We should have been doing this a long, long time ago, and it is our responsibility. We're all Canadians, and we will do it together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to begin by acknowledging we're on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people and express gratitude to them for their generosity and patience. Miigwech. I also want to thank the honourable member for Sackville, Preston, Chestercook for sharing his time with me and acknowledge that this shows a spirit of respect towards opposition benches from the current Liberal Party. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak, although I still must object to the use of time allocation and reducing time for debate in this place, but the respect that's shown in shortening time with shared time from a Liberal member and have the intention of attacking their legislation, which I've done recently with shared time. Today is a different occasion because I think Bill C-68, to repair the damage done to the Fisheries Act under former budget implementation, omnibus budget implementation, Bill C-38, in spring of 2012, as the honourable member from Sackville, Preston, Chestercook was just referencing. This bill goes a long way, in fact, completely repairs. Within the ambit of what the Minister of Fisheries can do, this repairs the damage that was done by Omnibus Budget Bill C-38 in relation to the Fisheries Act. And I want to speak to that and the one aspect where it doesn't fully repair the damage. So this piece of legislation is definitely historic legislation. The Fisheries Act was brought in under Sir John A. Macdonald. Canada has had a Fisheries Act for 150 years. And that act, which traditionally dealt with what's constitutionally enshrined as federal jurisdiction over fish, some people may wonder where the environment landed in the Constitution of Canada, the British North America Act. Where was the environment? Well, the fish are federal, the water's provincial, if it's freshwater, and it's federal if it's ocean water. So there's always been a mixed jurisdiction over the environment. But over fish, there's been no question. Fish are federal. And in the early 1980s, this act received a really significant improvement, which was to recognize that fish move around, and you can't protect fish without protecting their habitat. So the Fisheries Act was modernized with a real degree of environmental protection. It had always been a strong piece of environmental legislation because if you protect fish, you tend to protect everything around them. But in this case, the Fisheries Act was improved in the early 80s by a former Minister of Fisheries, who by accident of history happens to be the father of the current Minister of Fisheries. So it was the Right Honourable Romeo LeBlanc. We use the term Right Honourable because he went on to be our Governor General, who amended the Fisheries Act in the 1980s to include protection of fish habitat, requiring a permit from a federal Minister of Fisheries if that habitat was either temporarily or permanently harmed or damaged. Now, this piece of legislation is the significant pillar upon which much of Canada's environmental regulation rested. And what happened in Bill C-38 in spring of 2012 was a travesty that remains in the annals of parliamentary history, the single worst offense against environmental legislation and environmental protection by any government ever. And it was followed up with a second omnibus budget bill in fall of 2012 called C-45, which took an axe to the Navigable Waters Protection Act. C-38 in the spring repealed the Environmental Assessment Act and replaced it with a bogus act, which I will return to discuss. C-38 also repealed the Kyoto Implementation Act, repealed the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy, gutted the Fisheries Act. So rather than go on about that, the honourable member just speaking referenced the changes that were made. I can tell you some of the changes that were made, and I was so pleased to see them repealed. You open your copy of C-38, and one of the first things you see, in fact, the first thing, is Section 1, Sub 1, the definitions commercial, indigenous, and recreational in subsection 2.1 of the Fisheries Act are repealed. I can tell you, this isn't a scientific thing. This is what C-38 did to our Fisheries Act. Fish were no longer fish. They were only fish if they were commercial, indigenous, or recreational. That language came straight from a brief from industry. Didn't come from civil servants within Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Came from the Canadian Electricity Association. So that's repealed. We've got, this bill brings back protections for habitat. This bill goes back to looking at some of the foundational pieces of how the Fisheries Act is supposed to work, and then it goes farther. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I was really surprised and pleased to find that the bill, for the first time ever, the Fisheries Act will now prohibit the taking into captivity of whales. That was a very nice surprise. It's section 23.1. I did ask the minister the other day in debate if he'd be prepared to expand this section in amendments, because over on the Senate side, the bill that was introduced by retired Senator Wilfred Moore, currently sponsored by Senator Murray Sinclair, and I would be the sponsor of this bill if it ever makes it to the House, S-203, would not only ban the taking of whales into captivity, but the keeping of whales in captivity. And I'm hoping when this bill gets to the Fisheries Committee, we might be able to expand that section and amend this so that we can move ahead with protection of whales. This bill is also forward-looking in introducing more biodiversity provisions, the declaration of areas as ecologically sensitive, work that can continue to expand the protection of our fisheries. I will turn to where there are gaps, and because I completely support this bill, I do hope for a few amendments, but they come down to being tweaks. Where does this bill fail to repair the damage of Bill C-38? And that's in the part that's beyond the ability of the Minister of Fisheries to fix. That's the part about why did Harper aim at the Fisheries Act, the Navigable Waters Protection Act, and the Environmental Assessment Act. There was not random violence in this vandalism. This was quite focused, and it was focused on destroying the environmental assessment process so that we would no longer be reviewing 4,000 projects a year. Now, of those 4,000 projects a year that were reviewed under our former Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, most of them, like 95% of them, were reviewed through screenings that were paper exercises, did not engage hearings, and so forth. But it did mean that at a very preliminary level, if there was a problem with a project, a red flag could go up and it could be booted up to further study. There's a reason that the Fisheries Act habitat provisions were repealed. They were one of the sections listed in our former Environmental Assessment Act under what was called the law list. A minister giving a permit under Section 35 of our former Fisheries Act automatically triggered that that decision was subject to environmental assessment. Similarly, why did the former government take a hatchet to the Navigable Waters Protection Act? Like the Fisheries Act, an act we've had around for a long time, since 1881. Not an act that had impeded the development of Canada, or we would never have had a railroad. Since 1881, we had the Navigable Waters Protection Act, and the previous government just took a real axe to that, and the current Minister of Transport has gone a long way towards fixing it under one portion of C-69. Here's why. The Navigable Waters permits also were a trigger under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. If you can see where I'm going here, this was synchronized action. This was not random. Now, the current government has pledged to fix all the damage done by the previous government in what they did to environmental laws. And where the failure to fix things is evident is in what's called the impact assessment legislation, Bill C-69, which has abandoned the concept of law list altogether, abandoned the concept of having permits required and environmental assessment required whenever federal money is engaged. In other words, the Harper imprint of going from 4,000 projects reviewed a year to a couple dozen will remain the law of the land without significant improvements to C-69. Particularly, decisions the Minister of Fisheries makes should be subject to an EA, just as decisions of the Minister of Transport should be subject. In my last minute, Mr. Speaker, I want to turn our attention to something I hope the Minister of Fisheries will take up next, because really, he's doing a great job. I hope he'll take up looking at open pen salmon aquaculture. It must end. It is a threat to our wild salmon fishery on the Pacific coast. It's a threat to such a depleted Atlantic salmon wild stocks on Atlantic coast where I'm originally from. There is no Atlantic salmon fishery because it's been destroyed, but there still are Atlantic salmon. They could restore themselves if they didn't have to compete with the escapement of Atlantic salmon from fish farms in Atlantic Canada and the destruction of habitat of those farms, while on the west coast, these are not even indigenous species that are escaping and threatening our wild salmon. So let's close down open pen fisheries. Let's give aquaculture to the Minister of Agriculture and have fish in swimming pools on land, and let's let the Minister of Fisheries protect our coastal ecosystems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Yukon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have a great deal of respect for this member on both her excellent knowledge in the environment and also on process. And she started out talking about process and time allocation. And I'd just like to ask her, because of her expertise in that area, a solution. As you know, we're sent to Parliament to accomplish. There's so much has to be done in a year. And along with deleterious motions and everything, there has to be a way to get everything in. There was, I mean, what some legislatures in the world use is programming, but there didn't seem to be appetite in opposition parties for that solution to it. So I wonder what the member suggests in light of the fact that in this and previous parliaments, a number of deleterious motions can stop the agenda, how any government would get its a program through, and important bills like this, through Parliament within the year's time that they have.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member from the Yukon for a very useful question, because I would love to see us fix the problem. I did talk to colleagues of mine in the Parliament of Westminster. There's one Green Party member there, Carolyn Lucas, leader of the Greens of UK and Wales, and she said, don't go for that programming thing because it really does fast-track bills without enough time for debate. What I think we should do is open up the process here. The question of whether we can get a bill through, whether the honourable leader of the government in the House, the whip, they get frustrated and say we're going to have to bring in time allocation because we're not going to get this through. And I think what's happening is the secretiveness of the meeting of House leaders and whips. They're trying to figure out how do we schedule something. If those meetings were open, imagine if I could go to them. Imagine if any member could go. And they could say, well, our side isn't even being reasonable here. We ought to be able to provide a list of how many speakers we have on that bill. Another very helpful thing would be if we followed the rules that we still have, Mr. Speaker, but which are now viewed as no longer in effect. If no member was allowed to give a speech that was a written speech, if you had to come here and give a speech on what you know about the bill without notes, I think you wouldn't find so many people at the last minute willing to stand up and give a speech on the matter before this place. And we might find we could move along more expeditiously with, as they do in the Parliament of Westminster, only people speaking who are intimately knowledgeable with the question at hand.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my neighbour from Saanich Gulf Islands for her speech. As she knows, my riding is home to the iconic Cowichan River, which is a designated heritage river in British Columbia and home to salmon habitat. I've written a lot of petitions, I've handed a lot of petitions to the government on the status of the Lake Cowichan Weir, which is responsible for managing flow rates into the Cowichan River. And the government has acknowledged that summer low flows in the Cowichan River are a threat to fish and fish habitat, but there doesn't seem to be any explicit legal protection for environmental flows in this bill. And I'd just like to hear her comments on that. Thank you.
For Saanich Gulf Islands.
I thank my friend from Cowichan, Malahat, Langford. Yes, the issue around environmental flows is one of the places that we might be able to see this legislation amended. But even as we're currently looking at it, I think the question of protection of habitat, when an artificial weir such as the one at Lake Cowichan has the effect and the flow rates have the effect of threatening the salmon population, I think the Minister of Fisheries would still have the power to act to protect those salmon. But the introduction of the term environmental flows would clarify the matter, and I certainly would support it.
Time for one more short question and response. The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to our honourable colleague from Saanich Gulf Islands. I have one question. Does the honourable colleague have any evidence where the harmful cuts, and that's the words that are being put forth, that the cuts that were made in 22 or the changes that were made in 2012 to the Fisheries Act made by the previous government had any evidence where there was harmful destruction of fish and fish habitat.
Honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
First, this is my first opportunity to address the honourable member from Caribou, Prince George, since he returned from an illness, and I'm so happy to see him back on the floor of the House. Now, I can give you many examples from just my own riding. We had clam beds on Salt Spring Island that were being over-harvested. Habitat was not being protected. And when residents of my community contacted Fisheries and Oceans, they said, we can't get there and do anything about it, and besides, we can't protect that habitat anymore. We had every single fisheries officer within the Department of Fisheries and Oceans was also given a pink slip, so they didn't have the capacity to go out and help. I did hear from some of my halibut fishing constituents that they were having trouble with habitat issues. It was widespread and quite disastrous. So we need to bring back the law and the individual officers who enforce the law.
Just for the benefit of all honourable members, I'll let members know that we have crossed the 5-hour mark after the first round of speeches on the bill that's before the House, and consequently all speeches from this point onward will be limited to the 10 minutes for speeches, 5 minutes for questions and comments. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is indeed a pleasure to be back in the House and speaking on this subject that we have before us today, and that is Bill C-68. And Bill C-68, from a policy perspective, is another piece of unnecessary legislation aimed at making Canadians feel good. It's filled with fluff. It is all about pandering to environmental groups. It is all about making sure that, well, those that backed the Liberals in the 2015 election are getting their due. Much as what we saw earlier when we had the member of Parliament from Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake speak. And for those that are in the audience, and if you were falling asleep previously, stay tuned because it's about to get a little bit more lively. I promise you this in my short period of time that I've got. So that the member of Parliament from Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake stood up and talked about how the investment, he was proud about his investment, the government investing in fisheries and investing in areas within his region. And his own family has just received a lucrative surf clam quota worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You've heard that correctly. I'm going to look right at the camera, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to say that. Again, the Liberal Member of Parliament's own brother just received, that's the Liberal Member of Parliament from Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake, own brother just received a lucrative surf clam quota worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and all on a bid that was, well, there are lots of questions with it. And so I would beg to differ in terms of some of the points that have been put forth about open and transparent and how, you know, this minister seems to be going about doing the right things. Well, he's spending a lot of money. There's no two ways about it. He's spending a lot of money, but is there value that is going to come out of that money? And who is benefiting from the money that is being spent? And I would hesitate to say that, Mr. Speaker, that Bill C-68 is going to be the stopgap, is going to be the changes that these people that the government is putting forth, that they're saying that is going to have such a profound impact on our waterways and our fisheries. Mr. Speaker, I sit on the Fisheries Committee and had the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard before us numerous times. And I'm going to say that we just heard just last week that our northern cod is at near decimated levels. You see, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard likes to throw money at things, but they don't like to throw money at things that are going to have an impact on those that are in the communities, and they haven't done anything that is going to help create more fish so that we have fish for the future. Fish not only for today, but for the future. And the changes that they have put forth, and they said that Prime Minister Harper has absolutely gutted the Fisheries Act. And I will be the first to admit that the Fisheries Act has been around for about 150 years, and maybe it needed some modernization. But the changes that they put forth, absolutely are, it's more fluff than anything else. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, we had numerous witnesses that, bless you, we've got one of the pages that just sneezed, so I'm going to say bless you, I'll stop at that. But we had numerous witnesses that came before the committee, and whether they were academic or whether they were the environmental groups, the NGOs that we like to call, that have a steady stream into this minister's office. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, we have local fishers and people in those communities that say, you know what, with the Conservatives, at least we knew that we had an ear of the ministers. Now we have to go through the NGOs to get to the ministers, because the ministers place greater importance on the NGOs than they do on those that actually matter the most, and that's Canadians. Those are the communities and the Canadians that their policy impacts the most. You know, it's interesting, you know, again, we've got the Member of Parliament from Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake, and we've had the Prime Minister stood up, and we've had the Minister of Fisheries stand up and talk about the surf clam, how it's all about reconciliation, and yet, Mr. Speaker, the winning bid had no First Nations, no multiple First Nations partners, which was, I'll add, and I'll say it again, was a critical component of bid criteria. None until after the bid was announced. 3 weeks later, there was an announcement of the First Nations that were there. Their bid actually included just placeholders and said, hey, trust us, we'll get that done. Guess what, Mr. Speaker? That Member of Parliament's brother, the group that got the bid wasn't even incorporated, wasn't even a legal entity, as a matter of fact. They weren't. They didn't have a boat, didn't have a vessel, they didn't have a facility to do this. So it really leads people to believe that, well, there's a smell there that just doesn't smell right, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, it sounds very corrupt. And so it's very rich to have that Member of Parliament stand up in the House and actually speak and preach about his open and transparent government he's so proud of. Well, obviously he's proud of it because his family's benefiting hundreds of millions of dollar quota, unacceptable. And yeah, that's right. As we know, you know, if it's open and transparent. It's transparent. If you are a Liberal insider or a Liberal family member, hey, you know what? You get the appointment. If you are a Liberal insider or family member, you get the job. If you are a Liberal insider or family member, guess what? You get the quota. And that's what we're seeing. And today, Bill C-68, Mr. Speaker, it is interesting that we have these people that are saying that Prime Minister Harper absolutely decimated this. I'm going to tell you that this is more of an attack on Prime Minister Harper and folks disliking Prime Minister Harper than his policy. And that's shameful. Because not one witness that came to our committee to testify on this, not one, could demonstrate any loss of fish habitat, fish habitat, because of the 2012. And that is academics, that is environmental groups, that is fishers or industry experts. Nobody. And we asked. Look, Conservatives want to make sure that we have the appropriate balance between economy and environment. We do not want to see our rivers, lakes, and streams ruined. I'm a hunter. I'm a fisher. Our family has farmed. We have logged. We have fished. We have hunted our property in the Cariboo-Chilcotin for generations. And we want to make sure it's there for future generations. And it's shameful how we get this, you know, it's just, holier than thou attitudes when all they're doing is pandering to special interest groups. It really is. And if you can tell that I'm a little heated, it's because I was in Grand Bank, Newfoundland earlier this week, and I talked with Edgar, I talked with Brenda, Barbara, Bernice, Barry, I talked with Tom, I talked with Kevin, I talked with people that are impacted by the decisions that this minister has made, policy decisions that this minister has made that impact that community. 300 years of fishing history. And they've had their ups and downs, and they've had consistent economic, viability. They've been okay for about 27 years in terms of this surf clam fishery, but this arbitrary decision to take away 25% of the quota from that community is it's unacceptable, and it's going to see job losses. And Edgar told us, look, I don't want to go on EI. I want a job. I've had 52 weeks of work this year, and this decision looks like I'm going to lose 17 weeks of work. I don't want EI. I want to work. And we heard that time and time again. And shamefully, it seems like the minister's more intent on looking after his Liberal family and friends than the families of Grand Bank. It's disappointing, Mr. Speaker, and frankly, it's shameful. And with that, I'm going to I'll cede the floor. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his speech. A few years back, I was visiting Washington State, and in Puget Sound, I had the opportunity to take a whale sightseeing tour. And we followed a pod of orcas from Puget Sound all the way to within sight of Vancouver Island. And it was impressive to watch these animals travel this incredible distance. But in my part of the world, in Niagara, there's 20 minutes from my home, there's a place called Marineland that has an orca in a very small tank. This piece of legislation speaks to that, and to prevent individuals from capturing whales like orcas and for captivity. This is a practice that needs to end, and I was wondering if the honourable member could comment on that practice and what he and his party think about that.
The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Well, I want to thank the honourable colleague for his question. There's no two ways about it. We live in a beautiful province. We are adjacent Washington State. Our waters are pristine. We've got some of the most iconic vistas and views, and I only need to go back to when we hosted the world with the 2010 Olympics, and the world got to see what Vancouver and British Columbia really had to offer, Mr. Speaker, and I too have gone on whale watching trips, and I agree that they are majestic beasts and are just beautiful. We should do whatever we can to save them. Mr. Speaker, I would like to, through you, pose a question back, is how he feels about one of his Liberal colleagues' brothers getting a lucrative surf clam quota worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his remarks. I do have a question in regard to this contract, this crab fishery contract, and I think in light of Shawinigan and the sponsorship scandal, I'm a little concerned that the governing party is back to its old tricks. But I would like him to please explain how this consortium that he described was able to get around the requirement that Indigenous people be involved. I would be very interested in how they achieve that.
For Caribou Prince George.
That is an excellent question, and one that many people have questions or questions regarding it, including First Nation groups that actually submitted a bid. So there were First Nations that actually submitted a bid that were, unsuccessful in it, and then there's a group that was successful that didn't have any First Nations in it, only had placeholders. As a matter of fact, they said, don't worry about it, we'll get them after we get the bid. And that's what happened. There are a lot of questions, Mr. Speaker, a lot of questions. And, the minister and the Prime Minister said, how dare we try to pit First Nation versus non-First Nation? As a matter of fact, this decision has nothing to do with reconciliation and more to do with just looking after Liberal friends and family, and it's shameful because, Mr. Speaker, there were First Nations involved in bids. Many First Nations, multiple First Nations put bids in and were unsuccessful. However, the group that got it had no First Nations in until 3 weeks after the winning bid was announced. Thank you.
We have time for one more short question and response. The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And like the honourable member, I couldn't believe the audacity that the Liberal Party would have having the member from Preston, Sackville, Chesapeake stand up in this House and speak to this issue, given the fact that his brother was just given hundreds of millions of dollars in quota. Now, I know the honourable member was out in Newfoundland this week. He spoke generally about the impact that this has, about people wanting to work, not wanting to be on employment insurance, and the Liberal Party's intent of making the employment insurance system the largest employer in this country. I'd like to hear from the honourable member on what he heard in Newfoundland.
The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, we talked with family members that, listen, I'll tell you exactly. So we were talking to a lady on the plant, and she said, we have lost brothers, we have lost sons, we have lost fathers, we have lost uncles and grandfathers in fisheries. We have 300 years of fishery history, and they said that the scars of those losses go right straight through the community. The scars of those losses go through the community. And what this minister has done is opened up those wounds all over again and placed the community of Grand Bank in so much uncertain times. With that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for allowing me to bring the voices of Grand Bank to this floor once again.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for St. John's East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Prince Rupert? Sorry. Caribou Prince George for his remarks. It's always great to rise in this House to talk about an issue that's so important to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, and certainly the people from St. John's East. Amending the Fisheries Act to bring it into modern times and provide the flexibility we need to make sure that we not only provide for the care and protection of marine mammals like porpoises, whales, and dolphins, but also take into account Indigenous concerns and make sure that our Act and our fisheries protections takes their traditional knowledge and beliefs into account. It's also important that we provide some framework so that Canadians can better understand the decisions that the minister will be making, how they will be made, to make sure that there's advisory panels to consult on fees, to make sure that people who are licensees under the Fisheries Act, who are engaged in the fishery, are appropriately paying into the system, but not overpaying into the system, to make sure that when we administer the rights and responsibilities of government with respect to our offshore resources, that the stakeholders appropriately participate in that, and so the Advisory Council will be a great way to do that. We also have to make sure that we meet our international obligations for fish habitat, and I believe I'll be sharing my time with the member for... Oh, it's not necessary? Okay, sorry, we're on to make sure that we do the good work to protect the coastal waters of Canada under our international obligations under the ACCI targets of 10% by 2020. In order to protect these areas, we need to make changes to the Act so that we can protect fish habitat with respect to works, undertakings, or activities that may result in the death of fish or the harmful alteration, disruption, or destruction of fish habitat. In the case of Newfoundland and Labrador, this is obviously a very sensitive topic. Newfoundlanders and Labrador care about the protection and the growth of the biomass of fish off of our coasts, and at the same time we need to make sure that we can undertake our enterprise so that we can maintain the high standards of living that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and indeed all Canadians get to enjoy. So this requires that we both maintain access to the productive areas of our coasts, but also at the same time that we identify areas that are ecologically important, and there's going to be a balance that needs to be struck. My understanding is that the Fisheries Ministry has, through the various mechanisms that already exist, hived off about 7.75% of Canada's waters for protection, meeting our targets of 5% by December 31st of 2017, but there's still some way to go. And the changes that we're proposing in the Fisheries Act, which the member from Prince Rupert will have a chance to examine in committee after hopefully we pass it here today, and I encourage all members to vote in favour of it at this stage, will allow the government to move forward and protect those next 2.25% or more of our coastal areas so that we can protect these ecologically important areas. Protect things like cold water coral off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, or dogfish off the southern coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. Make sure that our ecologically protected areas are interlinked so that species can travel safely through them, so that important breeding grounds are protected, important transitory areas for different marine mammals are protected. I noticed that yesterday the minister made an important announcement about protecting right whales. This has been, quite a, I mean, it's a scary prospect that it's possible that the world may lose yet another species this year in the right whale. We saw a couple of weeks ago the loss of the last male white rhino protected at Old Pejeta in Kenya. And now here we are in a situation where people are very concerned about the reproductive capacity of right whales in Atlantic waters as they pass through the Gulf of St. Lawrence, through very important areas for the industrial development of Canada. But at the same time, we need to take protections such as Minister Garneau is undertaking, the Minister of Transport is undertaking, thanks Mr. Speaker, under the Transportation Act, and also the Minister of Fisheries is doing. But the changes that we're proposing will allow them to do more and do it in the right way, provide them a period of time in which we can make quick decisions to save species. I look forward to the protections that are coming. I know when oil and gas proponents had been meeting with me earlier in this year regarding British Petroleum, for instance, and their desire to do offshore exploratory drilling off the coast of Nova Scotia. There was some concern that their ships, their drill rigs, whatnot, are going to be expected to move at a slower pace through those waters. I fully applaud the foresight of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency in including those conditions, because now we're seeing that this is going to be an important factor not only for oil and gas exploration but for other transportation in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, similar to what happened last year, is my understanding. So it'll be great to see. It is very heartwarming and good to see the government of the day putting in place the mechanisms, regulatory, policy-related, and now legislative, that will help Canada meet its international targets to protect cetaceans. The 45 days to address the threat of the proper management and control of fisheries and conservation and protect fishing is obviously very important to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. There's a strongly held belief, not always supported by the science, that cod is coming back. We see it coming back in Norway. We see it coming back in the North Sea. We see Iceland's cod fishery recovering, and yet Canada's cod fishery remains a bit stagnant. But it's important to have hope. It's important to make sure that the science is done. I applaud the government's earlier decisions to hire more fishery scientists in Newfoundland and Labrador to help create a plan to see the regrowth of the cod stocks. But as we're seeing this year, the science does not support a regrowth. Cod still finds itself in the critical zone. In order for us to get back to the point where we can have a sustainable amount of biomass so that cod fishing can be undertaken safely with the preservation of the resource, that historical amounts of cod can be taken and support the critical mass of infrastructure that's needed to make sure that Newfoundland can fully engage in the fishery, requires that we be patient, but also that we do the necessary science. It's good to see that the minister will be provided with special tools under the Act in order to take special steps to put a halt to overfishing if the science deems that that would be required. Protecting, preserving, and restoring our environment should be a key principle of the Fisheries Act. It'll make sure that Canadians trust the Act. Not all Canadians, when they think about fisheries, think about the same way Newfoundlanders do. I mean, I need to have empathy for the environmentalists who, when they look at the fishery, they see it as something that has perhaps a larger impact on our environment than I do. But it's important that all Canadians have confidence that our fisheries are being undertaken in a sustainable way. I know Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have faith that it is and that more could be done. They have faith that the government is doing the right things by putting scientists in place. They like that the focus is on the fishery, that the Minister of Fisheries is taking this time to propose new legislation to bring it into the 21st century, to make it more modern. We don't want to return to the previous version of the Fisheries Act, but to make the law even better than it was before. Through this process, it's not just something that's risen out of, the imagination of the minister. This is after a period of thousands of consultations undertaken by the minister and his department. All Newfoundlanders and Labradorians find this to be of critical importance to our future. When the previous minister was in Newfoundland and Labrador early in this government's tenure, all Newfoundland and Labrador MPs were invited to participate in the consultations that happened at that time, and those consultations have continued. People feel that their voices are being heard by the government, but not always, perhaps, by the department. And so providing this link between Canadians, the government ministries, and then back to the departments is important for confidence to be created. These changes will allow both environmentalists and people who are engaged in the industry of fishing to have more confidence. It will allow us to meet our international obligations with respect to the preservation of 10% of our territory, and it's long overdue. So without further ado, I'd just like to encourage all members of this House to support the bill at second reading, get it to committee where people can answer some of the questions that my colleague from Prince Rupert St. George had earlier, and that we can have this improved for future generations of Canadians and the preservation and growth of our resource. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. John's East will have 5 minutes for questions and comments when the House next returns to debate on the question that's before the House. But now we will proceed to statements by members. Déclaration des députés, l'honorable député d'Ottawa-Vanier.
The honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier.
Today marks the last day in the remarkable public service career of Yaprak Baltachulu. Since joining the public service almost 30 years ago, her smarts, her drive, and her style of servant leadership have led her to hold senior positions across government, including Deputy Secretary to Cabinet at the Privy Council, Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Deputy Minister of Transport, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure, and since 2012, Secretary of the Treasury Board. Sous sa direction.
Under her leadership, the Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada has been listed as one of the 100 best employers in Canada. On top of heading departments and advising ministers and prime ministers, Yaprak has also devoted herself to mentoring a new generation of women leaders in the public service, ensuring that women have the place that they deserve at the highest levels of government.
Conseil du Trésor,
In fact, at Treasury Board, 70% of upper management is made up of women.
Join me, Mr. Speaker, in giving our sincere congratulations and best wishes to Yaprak on her retirement. Merci beaucoup, on behalf of all Canadians.
The honourable member for Calgary, Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in memory of Stan Block, who passed away from the midst of the Rocky Mountain Calvary Chapel congregation and the community on February 27, 2018, at the youthful age of 65. Stan will be greatly missed by Lori, his wife of 43 years, his children, grandchildren, mother, siblings, friends, and fellow congregation members. Stan dedicated his life to serving God, which included 17 years as associate pastor at Rocky Mountain Calvary Chapel. Those of us who knew Stan loved him for his positive, encouraging, and faithful servant that he was. He leaves a legacy of running with patience the race that is set before us, looking on to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. My sincerest condolences go out to the family, and especially to his wife, Lori, to his friends, and to his fellow congregation members. Stan leaves a legacy of service to Christ that will long fuel the passion of those whom Stan brought to him. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Boniface,
Mr. Speaker, in mid-April, Winnipeggers will don everything and anything white. A whiteout is coming, and the Bell MTS Place will be a sight. Après un hiver qui sembla interminable.
After a winter that seemed endless at times, sometimes even harsh, another winter storm is expected in my hometown.
For Stanley is our new chant of choice. For Wheeler, Liney, Hellebuck, and Shifley, too many to voice. La ténacité de Perrault.
Perrault and his teammates' tenacity makes us smile, and the young people on the team show great promise.
Our city has tasted much victory. Our curling team Jones, and our Bison women's hockey. So you see, Mr. Speaker, Winnipeg is aglow as we rise together and say, "Go Jets!
Go!
Go Jets!"
The honourable member for Vancouver, Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, this April is Daffodil Month, and once again, Canadians across the country will be donating their time and money to the Canadian Cancer Society. No family is untouched by this disease. 2 in 5 Canadians receive a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime, yet thanks to improved treatments, the survival rate has now reached 60%. This is in no small part thanks to the research and support provided by Daffodil Sales. Yet, the fight against this disease goes on, and too many Canadians lose loved ones to cancer every year. Through the generosity of Canadians and the hard work of the Canadian Cancer Society, we know we will make great progress in the future. On behalf of the New Democratic Party of Canada, I wholeheartedly encourage all members of this House and Canadians everywhere to show their support this April by wearing a daffodil and giving all they can in the fight against cancer.
The honourable member for Hamilton West, Lancaster Dundas.
Mr. Speaker, this weekend millions of Canadians and well over 1 billion of people around the world will gather together with family and friends to celebrate Easter. For Christians, Easter is one of the holiest seasons where we celebrate the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is a season where we focus on joy that can often come after struggle and sorrow. And I'd like to point out to this House His Holiness's remarks on his Palm Sunday sermon, where he encouraged youth to continue to advocate for justice. J'encourage nos jeunes à ne pas.
I encourage our youth to not be afraid to defend justice. Mr. Speaker, I wish a happy Easter to all of my colleagues and fellow citizens who are celebrating this Holy Week.
Let us take time as we gather with loved ones and be inspired by the beautiful Easter message of hope and renewal. Joyeux Pâques à tous et à...
Happy Easter to everyone. Bona Pasqua.
Honourable member for Langley, Aldergrove.
Mr. Speaker, this is Holy Week when Christians observe Passover, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday to remember the crucifixion and triumphant resurrection of Jesus Christ. Because of his loving sacrifice for each of us, we have forgiveness and hope. This week, we also gather with family and friends. Diane and I will be spending Easter here in Ottawa with our son, John, our wonderful daughter-in-law, Jen, and our grandchildren, Carrington and Richie. They're visiting from Kentucky. John is a brilliant professor and doctor of microbiology at the University of Louisville. Jen is a director of Louisville's largest long-term and palliative care facility for seniors. Carrington likes to play the ukulele and wants to be the President of the United States. Richie is very smart, collects eggs from the chickens on their farm, and is actually a superhero. I know they will enjoy their visit here in Canada's Parliament. This is a very special weekend, and our family wishes each of you a very wonderful Easter.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, on the weekend, I celebrated 6 years of remission with my family. Like every year, I celebrated by giving time to fantastic organizations in Vaudreuil-Soulanges who work constantly to help those fighting cancer.
This year, I proudly took part in the Great Spin with my good friend and neighbor, Mei-Lin Yi, who invited her Sisters Reloaded and other members of our community to raise some much-needed awareness and some funds at Physical Park. On April 28th, I will be joining the Hudson Fire Department, the Canadian Cancer Society, and organizer Ali Nadeau for Hudson's 5th annual Shave to Save, helping to shave heads, raise awareness, and raise funds. Et en juin prochain,
This June, I'll be participating in the 15th edition of the Relay for Life in Pincourt Olympic Park. This year, I am honored to serve alongside 14 exceptional ambassadors, led by our captain, the Mayor of Pincourt, Mr. Yvan Cardinal. I encourage all members of our community to support these initiatives and all opportunities to act as residents as in the fight against cancer.
Member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Lord Reading Law Society on its 70th anniversary. Lord Reading, which was created in 1948, was founded with the mandate of lobbying for fair representation of Jewish attorneys within the Quebec Bar and on the bench after decades of discrimination. As discrimination against Jewish attorneys was gradually eradicated, Lord Reading turned its attention to fighting for the rights of all minorities, including Quebec's English-speaking attorneys and judges. Mr. Speaker, I would ask all my colleagues to help me honor this terrific organization. Its President, David Attegi, Vice President Ina Nakim, as well as past President Larry Markowitz join us on the Hill today. Let's wish them continued success in their efforts to promote the equality and rights of all within the legal community and Quebec society at large, and I take this opportunity to wish all my colleagues a very happy Passover.
The honourable member for Calgary Confederation.
Mr. Speaker, most of us go to work in the morning expecting to come home again. This is not a luxury that our nation's frontline law enforcement officers enjoy. Their jobs are unpredictable, and so are the consequences of their work. Every day they go to work hoping they'll come home after their shift. Every day they put their lives on the line. Every day we borrow these courageous individuals from their families. Their families live in a constant state of trepidation until they hear the reassuring sound of the front door opening. This week, Constable Jordan Forget, a 5-year member of the Calgary Police Service, was shot twice in the line of duty. While his injuries are serious, he is stable and expected to recover from his wounds, and thank God for that. On behalf of all Calgarians, we just want to thank Jordan and his fellow officers for their service. We wish Jordan a speedy and full recovery, and I look forward to having him back on duty again soon.
The Honourable Member for Brassard-Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, some of my Liberal colleagues and I care deeply about the welfare of animals. As part of our consciousness-raising meetings, we looked at the transportation of animals to slaughter and the sometimes atrocious conditions they are transported in.
Heartened to learn that it is possible to do much better. Last fall, we met with Lockhart Transport, a family-owned company from Ontario that has voluntarily upgraded its trailers to ensure for the humane transportation of livestock. 6 years ago, Angie Lockhart and her family decided to change their business model to ensure humane handling of animals. This meant that Lockhart had to be innovative in retrofitting existing trailers with better designs to include onboard water, ventilation systems, and ramps that are easier to climb, all for the benefit of animals as well as keeping up with how other countries are handling livestock. Lockhart is an that has embraced what technology has to offer to better the transportation of livestock. Congratulations to Angie and her entire team.
Excellent.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga, Aaron Mills.
Mr. Speaker, I watched footage of a small boy covered in dust, face streaked with blood, eyes bearing hopelessness, being pulled out of rubble and into an ambulance. The brave people that saved this boy's life, along with tens of thousands like him, wore white helmets and belonged to the Syrian Civil Defense. They are a team of 3,700 civilian volunteers who devote their lives to helping vulnerable Syrians in conflict areas. 243 white helmets have lost their lives since 2013. They're here in Ottawa today so MPs can learn firsthand the brave work they do in Syria and what our Liberal government's support has meant for them on the ground. Support from our government has helped them increase women volunteers in their organization and provide more services for women and children, including access to first aid. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in commending their bravery, their dedication, and their commitment to saving lives. They are the heroes of our time.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege to rise in this House today to pay homage to a great Canadian, Peter Munk. Yesterday, we learned of his passing at the age of 90. Peter Munk founded one of the world's largest gold producers, Barrick Gold Corporation, and Mr. Munk became the epitome of the Canadian dream. He was born in Budapest and escaped Hungary with his family in 1944 when the Nazis invaded. He arrived in Canada with only a suitcase and, among other things, sold Christmas trees to help support himself as a student. One of his most famous quotes was, "You can create wealth, you are entitled to the joy of this creation, but ultimately society makes it possible and this wealth should flow back to society." He lived by that philosophy, Mr. Speaker, and donated over $300 million to worthy causes and institutions over his lifetime. We extend our thoughts and prayers to his wife Melanie, their children and grandchildren. He set the gold standard for the rest of us, Mr. Speaker, and he will be sorely missed.
The Honourable Member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
On World Autism Day, I would like to pay tribute to the leadership of Wendy and Serge Kokia. When seeking a diagnosis for their son over 20 years ago, Wendy and Serge came to believe that every individual and family in BC affected by autism should have access to state-of-the-art resources for assessment, treatment, education support, and research for full lifespan needs, from diagnosis to being a senior citizen. Now, the Pacific Autism Family Network and generous partners have raised over $32 million. Over 60 organizations bring essential resources together in one very special building and through satellite locations across BC. This year, an additional $11 million in Budget 2018 added the Autism National Resource and Exchange Network. West Vancouverites like Wendy and Serge Kokia and Jean and the late Michael Lewis and many, many more are tireless and give so much. It is with gratitude that we celebrate all of the families on World Autism Day. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kootenay, Columbia.
2 months ago, a reporter from the Hill Times stopped me outside the House of Commons and asked a question. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are getting married, she said. Do you have any advice for them? Yes, I said. Learn to cut each other some slack. Is that what you do for your wife? She asked. No, I said, just the opposite. I would not be here if she didn't cut me an incredible amount of slack. Being here in Ottawa 6 months of the year and away from home much of the time when we're in our ridings requires incredible sacrifices by our families. We miss special occasions, day-to-day household crises, conversations, and hugs, to name just a few. We do it because we all want a better Canada and we all want to serve our constituents well, but it does come with a personal cost. So to my family, Audrey, Sean, Kelly, Adrian, and Lolita, thank you for your love and support. And to the families of all members, thank you for cutting your favorite MP a lot of slack and for sharing them with us, with your constituents, and with all of Canada. You are very much appreciated.
Hear, hear. Member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For months now, my colleagues and I have been speaking against the Liberals' value test on jobs for youth. I'm happy to see that the minister intends on scrapping it. By getting rid of the attestation, they have admitted that they were wrong about this in the first place. But so far, nothing has been done to fix the situation for this year. I've met with hundreds of organizations since last December, and they're all saying the same thing. There will be thousands of underprivileged youth who don't get to go to summer camp this year. There will be thousands of university students without summer jobs this year. There will be thousands of homeless people who don't get the same shelter support this year. There will be thousands of impoverished seniors who won't receive health care support this year. The government needs to act now to make sure that the youth this year have the same opportunities they have each and every year before them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for London West.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to take the time to congratulate Wynne Gillentz on being a recipient of the 2018 Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts. These awards celebrate the remarkable careers of individuals in the Canadian visual and media arts community. Wynne Gillentz is a London, Ontario artist whose work provokes, questions, and investigates the nature of our humanity. His work has been exhibited widely in Canada, the United States, and Europe, and will be on exhibition at the National Gallery of Canada beginning today. His is an incredible 40-year-long career that deserves to be known and appreciated. I applaud Wynne Gillentz for being one of the 8 recipients this year receiving this prestigious award. I know your work will continue to engage and inspire audiences around the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Elected in 2015, the Liberal MP for Brampton East entered into a business relationship with a local businessman receiving pay from him. Even though there is a clear conflict of interest, the Brampton East member arranged to give his business partner privileged access to the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet while on the Prime Minister's disastrous trip to India. Why did the Prime Minister's office invite this individual on the trip to India when there is such a clear conflict of interest?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear on the facts. The member has consulted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this relationship and will keep following their advice. As is common practice, the member invited a diverse group of more than 30 stakeholders to participate in events around the India trip. In this case, people who were interested in attending could fill out a form online through the Canada-India Business Council, which the individual in question also did. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'Honourable Leader d'Opposition.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speakers, the Liberals always seem to want to benefit their friends who are helping them and giving them money. The MP for Brampton East arranged for the person who is paying him to get access to the Prime Minister in India. We have a Conflict of Interest Act, Mr. Speaker, to avoid this exact type of behaviour. But the Liberals seem to have no regard for the Conflict of Interest Act. They're under constant investigation for these breaches. Mr. Speaker, again, who in the PMO authorized the attendance of this individual on the trip to India?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
I have a lot of regard, respect for officers of Parliament, and that's why the member has consulted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this relationship and will keep following their advice. We were proud to be joined by hundreds of community leaders and members of the business community to strengthen our ties with India. But I remind the member that the individual in question also received an invitation through the Canada-India Business Council, which I think we can all agree is very important work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Now, let's be clear. It was the opposition that have referred this to the Conflict of Interest Act. It was to the office. It wasn't the Liberal member. Yet again, we have another questionable person travelling with the Prime Minister on his disastrous trip to India, and no one on the Liberal side who's willing to take responsibility. So much for transparency and accountability. All we get from these Liberals is denial and deflection. Mr. Speaker, what's next? Is the Prime Minister going to blame India for this new debacle?
I will continue to remind all Canadians that we are proud to be working to create more opportunity for the Canadian middle class and those working hard to join it. The member has consulted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this relationship and will keep following their advice. MPs and business organizations will often invite communities and business leaders to join these business exchanges, increase Canada's standing in the global community, and we're going to continue doing just that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Deputy Richmond Athabasca.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago, all members and senators voted unanimously in favour of Bill C-452 to combat procuring and human trafficking. All that is missing is the Prime Minister's signature for this bill to take effect. You heard me correctly, Mr. Speaker. All that's missing is the Prime Minister's signature to give our justice and public safety system the tools required to protect young girls living in the hell of prostitution and human trafficking. So my question is simple. What is the Prime Minister waiting for to sign the order? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague opposite for his question.
Heinous crimes imaginable, and our government is working to combat it in many ways. We're committed to strengthening its efforts to combat it and to better protect victims. Bill C-38 proposes to give law enforcement and prosecutor new tools to investigate and prosecute certain human trafficking offences that can be particularly difficult to prove. These are strengthening measures which will help law enforcement. Our government is committed to advancing this legislation and looks forward to receiving broad support from all parliamentarians into its passage in law.
Deputy Richmond Athabasca.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Here are the facts. Thousands of young girls across Canada, including 2,000 in Quebec alone, are in the grasp of pimps and street gangs. Since 2013, members and senators have done their duty and unanimously supported, all of them, including the Prime Minister, who was in opposition at the time, all supported Bill C-452. So when it comes time to legalizing marijuana, there's no problem moving quickly. But when it comes to defending our young girls who are facing pimps, it's taken a long time for the Prime Minister to sign the document. What is he waiting for? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it begs the question, if the opposition Conservatives were so concerned about human trafficking, why did they make cuts to law enforcement? Why did they make cuts to the entire public safety apparatus to the tune of $750 million? Mr. Speaker, as I said, this government believes in combating human trafficking. It's a very serious criminal offense. We've engaged with the Chamber and the other place. We're listening to parliamentarians. We're listening to stakeholders right across the country, and we will pass this law with the support of all parliamentarians.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister held a fundraising activity in Montreal. It will come as no surprise that Stephen Bronfman was there. Remember him?
He was pointed out and identified in the Paradise Papers. Who else? Mitch Garber, recently appointed president of the board for a new federal organization appointed by the Minister of International Trade. The Prime Minister thanked these people for the time that they've dedicated to the movement, but also for all the money they're paying to participate at these events. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister, does the Prime Minister thank his friends by doing them favors as well?
Democratic institution.
Taking concrete action to improve our already strong and robust rules around political fundraising events. That's why the Minister of Democratic Institutions introduced Bill C-50, which would give more information to Canadians than ever before by letting them know who is going to fundraisers and when they'll be happening and the amount required to attend. Canadians have a right to know and understand more than they do now about fundraising events attended by the Prime Minister, Cabinet Ministers, party leaders, and party leadership contestants. And we encourage all members in this House to join us in working to build a more open and transparent fundraising system for Canada.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of chortling and the clanking of the champagne glasses at the Prime Minister's latest fundraiser for the billionaires when he said he was not only there to get maximum donations but to get tough on the 1%. So step forward, Exhibit A. Stephen Brockman raised $250,000 for the Liberals in 2 hours. When Brockman got named in the Paradise Papers scandal, the Prime Minister immediately intervened and said no investigation necessary. No investigation happened. That's the power of who you know in the PMO. Why is this Prime Minister using the highest office in the land to feather the nests of his Liberal donors?
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that this party is leading the way with openness and transparency in fundraising. We are a shining example for what all parties in this House could do, and it's very curious, in fact, that the party from which this question proceeds is itself still keeping its information about its fundraisers a secret. Won't the member join our example?
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Well, the idea that the Prime Minister is hanging out with billionaires to protect the hard-pressed middle class is like telling us that those billionaire Liberal turkeys showed up and asked for an early Easter. I mean, as if. Which brings us to Mitch Garber. Now, he is a mega donor, and the Liberals paid him back by giving him his own agency. Ooh. And they call it Invest in Canada when it's really another case of investing in friends of the Liberal Party. Doesn't this Prime Minister understand that public service in this country needs to be more than a patronage smorgasbord for his friends, his donors, and his insider pals?
Honourable Member for Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that the member gave me the opportunity to talk about Invest in Canada, our new flagship investment and promotion agency in this country. I was traveling the country, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that Canadians know of this new agency. I am very proud we have appointed Mitch Garber, the chair of Cirque du Soleil, as a first chair for this agency. And we appointed also Yan McKay, which is the director of the Vancouver Economic Commission. We put people who understand business to bring business in Canada, because that's the way to create jobs around this country.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé.
Mr. Speaker, Air Canada flight attendants have filed complaints against the airline for sexual harassment and discrimination. Although the airline claims that a zero tolerance for harassment, they have outright denied these claims. Air Canada now asks female attendants to wear dress uniforms in order to show more cleavage. And they told one gay flight attendant to stop prancing. Air Canada even dictates the color and type of underwear flight attendants can wear. This is disgusting. This is unacceptable. What is the government going to do to ensure that anti-harassment policies are both adopted and followed by Canadian industries in Canada?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the member well knows that all members in this House believe that harassment of any type is unacceptable in the workplace or anywhere. As she knows, we put forward Bill C-65, which is legislation that will cover the Parliament Hill, the precinct. It was as well. It will cover the all federally regulated workplaces. Mr. Speaker, this is currently in committee. We're looking forward. We're accepting some amendments from all parties. It's going to be a strong piece of legislation. We committed to this in the past election, and we're going to
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, on March the 1st, when the Public Safety Minister was asked why the Liberals will not let the National Security Advisors appear at committee, he said, "You are asking me to wade into a classified discussion. I can't do that." Then he ran away from questions to the elevator, quite conveniently. Today, and earlier this week, he said that none of the information given by the advisor to the media was classified. So on what day was he telling the truth?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
All of them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to have the question because we'll be happy to discuss all manner of House committee work through the House leaders, which we can advance just as soon as the official opposition is fully briefed on all of the facts, classified and unclassified. Just let us know when they would like to get started, and all of that information can proceed.
Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians want to understand who trotted out the National Security Advisor to give classified or not classified information to the media who didn't know what was classified or what wasn't classified. So, Mr. Speaker, really what we know here is the government is trying to cover up the fact that they sent someone out to spin that they had a ridiculous conspiracy theory that somehow the Indian government was to blame for the Prime Minister's disastrous appearance. So, Mr. Speaker, why are the Liberals trying to cover this up? Why don't they just come clean?
Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, by offering a full classified briefing is hardly covering things up. The opposition has confirmed that they don't want to be encumbered by the truth when they're asking questions. Therefore, they are choosing to remain willfully ignorant of the facts. And there are other consequences too, Mr. Speaker, like the voting at the end of last week, which forced the opposition to vote against very good things that Canadians want. For example, the honourable member's party voted against the settlement of Yazidi women and girls in Canada.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the minister.
Order. The honourable député de Charlebourg, Saint-Charles.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Saint-Charles. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What's important here is that what we see is that the Liberals think that it's appropriate to offer the media a briefing when representatives of the people, the elected members of this House, aren't entitled to the information. The minister said himself that the information was not sensitive and confidential, but he's bent on not sharing it with MPs. So since the information given to the media wasn't sensitive, will the minister confirm that the media who received the briefing from the National Security Advisor are free to report, word for word, everything they heard during the briefing session? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition complains that he won't be able to ask questions about classified information. But, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly true already. What's classified needs to remain classified. What's being offered to the Leader is a full description of all the facts so that he can know what's classified and what's not. And then he'll be fully equipped to discharge his responsibility rather than just political gamesmanship.
The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, let's be honest. If the briefing to the media didn't include sensitive information, there's no reason why the journalists couldn't share it with Canadians. The minister seems to be stuck in his talking points from the PMO, but what I want to know is if the minister can confirm that the media who received the briefing are free to report everything they heard during that information session, that briefing session. Yes or no? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition, the Leader of the Opposition, because he's a Privy Councillor, has been offered a full and complete briefing on all matters with respect to this situation, both classified and unclassified, so that he can be fully informed. If he willfully refuses to be fully informed, Mr. Speaker, it appears that his only objective is a political game that has nothing to do with the truth.
Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, what we've been asking for is for Parliament to get the same briefing that the National Security Advisor gave to journalists. But we know that the National Security Advisor isn't the only person that
the public safety minister in this government is muzzling. They're also muzzling journalists, preventing them from reporting on what they heard in the unclassified briefing. So when will this minister stop muzzling the National Security Advisor, stop muzzling journalists, stop the cover-up, and tell Canadians the truth? Yes.
Mr. Speaker, only the Conservative Party would consider offering them a full brief of both classified and unclassified information so that they can know all the facts. Only the Conservative Party would see that as muzzling. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, they are tying themselves into some strange knots because they forced themselves last Friday to vote against some very good things the Canadians want. For example, Mr. Speaker, the funding for injured members of the RCMP, they voted against that, Mr. Speaker, and they voted against benefits for veterans.
The honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, it's a sad spectacle to see a member who has served the House for this long reduced to reading talking points from the Prime Minister's office. And it's also sad to see him continue to stand against a briefing for members of Parliament, asking simply to receive the same briefing that members of the media received. Now members of the media are confirming that the National Security Advisor told them they could not report everything that they received, even though it was an unclassified briefing. So why won't this minister simply do the right thing, stop covering up, and allow the National Security Advisor to appear before parliamentarians?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as I said some moments ago, I'm very glad to have the question, and we can have a very good discussion about all manner of committee work, and that discussion will go on among House leaders. But step number one, Mr. Speaker, is for the opposition to stop the political game and, in fact, inform themselves of all the relevant facts. The offer has been made for a full briefing, both classified and unclassified, so the Leader of the Opposition can have all of that information and then base himself on the truth and not some silly innuendo that they've dreamed up for themselves.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, we learned yesterday that as early as summer 2015, IBM was advising the government that Phoenix wasn't ready to go. So for those keeping score, that means departmental reviews, public sector unions, and the principal private contractor itself was saying Phoenix wasn't ready to go. Now, the Liberal Party has a rich history of going back on its commitments, Mr. Speaker. I'm thinking of electoral reform. I'm thinking of their promise on CEO stock option loopholes. Why is it the one time they could have used their great power of doubling back on their commitments to help Canadians, they passed up the opportunity?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services.
Mr. Speaker, IBM's testimony to the Senate committee last night confirmed that the Harper Conservatives blocked this program from the start. They de-scoped the project and ignored the advice of their contractors. The development of the request for proposal and award of contract for Phoenix was done by the previous government. We continue to work with IBM and will hold them to account to fulfill their obligations. To date, our government has invested $645 million to stabilize the pay system. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. The government I shouldn't have mentioned, I should have said the Liberal government, not the Trudeau government, Mr. Speaker, but the Liberals could have and should have delayed the implementation of Phoenix. But we learned yesterday that IBM advised the government to delay the implementation of the system because the system wasn't ready. When we've got the employees, public servants, unions, and the company that designed the system telling you not to go ahead with it, then they need to be listened to. So why did the government decide to gamble with the salaries of thousands of workers despite that? The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, IBM's testimony before the Senate committee last night conserved that the Harper Conservatives botched this program from the outset. They de-scoped the project and did not take into account the views of their supplier. We will continue to collaborate with IBM and will hold them accountable for fulfilling their obligations.
Bignard.
The Honourable Member for Les Billot-Binière. Mr. Speaker, with the Liberals, ethical problems are commonplace. This time, we learned that the member for Brampton East was hired by a construction company after becoming a member of Parliament. And coincidentally, the owner of that company was invited on the disastrous trip by the Prime Minister to India. But it's impossible to find out who invited the men, because both the MP and the Prime Minister are saying the other did. So who's telling the truth here, Mr. Speaker, and why all the smoke and mirrors? Mr. Speaker, let's clarify the situation. The MP consulted the Conflict of Interest Commissioner regarding these relations and continues to follow their advice, as was often done in the past. Some 30 stakeholders were invited to participate in activities surrounding the trip to India. In this case, people could fill out a form online through the Canada-India Business Bureau, and that was done in this case.
Speaker, the Conflict of Interest Code demands all members uphold their public duties with honesty and fulfill the highest standards so as to avoid real or apparent conflicts of interest. Mr. Speaker, this member's conduct goes well beyond apparent conflict. This is a blatantly formalized case of a cash-for-access retainer. Mr. Speaker, was the member's boss invited on the India trip to seek business in India, or was he invited to hang with the Prime Minister and the Ministers of Infrastructure and Innovation to get an inside track on contracts in Canada?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I have stated earlier, I shall repeat again that the member has consulted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this relationship and will continue following their advice. But I remind the member that the individual in question also received an invitation through the Canada-India Business Council, which I think we can all agree does some important work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government has abandoned even a half-hearted acknowledgement of members and ministers' ethical obligations under the Conflict of Interest Act and Code. Again, Mr. Speaker, a question asked and unanswered yesterday. Will the Prime Minister, will this Liberal government, disgraced by a spectrum of ethical lapses and violations, do the right thing and clean up the mess themselves, or are they leaving it once again to the Ethics Commissioner?
The member has consulted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this relationship and will continue working with their office and following their advice, as I would encourage all members to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, the Conflict of Interest Code is very clear. MPs are not to use their position to further our own private interests or those of another person or entity. Yet the member for Brampton East did just that. He ensured one of his private sector employers, the president of a large construction company, gained access to both the Prime Minister as well as key Liberal cabinet ministers. Obviously, both stand to profit as a result. Does the Prime Minister believe the Conflict of Interest Code is wrong, or does he just think the Liberals are above it?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Government House Leader.
That we be clear on the facts. The member has consulted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this relationship and will keep following their advice. As is common practice, the member invited a diverse group of more than 30 stakeholders to participate in events around the India trip. In this case, people who were interested in attending could fill out a form online through the Canada-India Business Council, which the individual in question also did. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Hyacinthe Bagot. Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has just published a new report on Phase 1 of the Liberal Infrastructure Plan. It confirms what we already knew, and it's hardly surprising the Liberals have failed to deliver. Half of the planned millions have not yet been allocated to projects. Half. The municipalities have been waiting for far too long for that money and for the Liberals to keep their promise. So on their behalf, I ask the government, where is the plan? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Infrastructure Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians from all across the country have benefited from over 3,000 projects approved under Phase 1 of the infrastructure plan to update public transit. After decades of inaction by the previous government, over $4 billion in federal funding has been approved for those projects, and the money will be spent as soon as our partners submit their applications. Thank you.
After quietly announcing the end of the current caregiver program, the minister was forced to change course by stating he would engage in consultation about the future of the program. At committee, IRCC officials committed to providing details of the consultation process to members. To date, no information has been provided, even though multiple consultations have already taken place. My direct request to attend the consultation with caregivers in Ottawa was denied. We were told that it was not a consultation meeting. Why did the minister's staff leave my office, and why the secrecy?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration and Refugees.
Services that caregivers give to Canadian families, and in fact we have recognized the importance of reuniting caregivers with their own families. That is why we invested more money and more resources to make sure that we bring down the processing time for caregivers from 5 years under the previous government to under 12 months under our government, and we are moving very quickly to also eliminate the existing cases under the living caregiver programs. The two existing programs are actually working well. We're conducting an assessment to make them even better. But let me be very clear. We will always maintain pathways to permanent residency for caregivers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Don Valley North.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to hear from the scientists in my region that after a decade of questions from their international counterpart about why the Conservative government was opposed to science, Canada is once again being viewed as a leader in science around the world, and that many of their international counterparts want to work in Canada. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to Science tell this House what our government is doing to capitalize on our renewed scientific reputation to recruit the top international talent?
Excellent. The Honourable Parliament Secretary for Science.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians can be proud that the world is once again looking to Canada as a leader in science. Top scientists and researchers from around the world want to come to Canada. Last week, the...
I'm sure that all members would be interested to know the response from the Honourable Parliament Secretary for Science, and so we'll allow her to start again with her response, and we'll get going and go on to the next question. The Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Canadians can be proud that the world is once again looking to Canada as a leader in science. Top scientists and researchers from around the world want to come to Canada. Last week, the Conservatives voted against investing to recruit the best and the brightest. We know that science and research help improve the lives of Canadians, and so the member from Don Valley North and the Liberal caucus voted for that funding. This morning, we were proud to announce the Canada 150 Research Chairs. We look forward to their exciting new breakthroughs. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
Well, this week, the government introduced a massive carbon tax on Canadians. Government official John Moffat called the tax a foundational element of the government's climate change plan. Yet last week, when the minister was repeatedly asked how much this foundational tax would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, she couldn't answer, and neither could her deputy. If the carbon tax is so important, how is it that the minister can't even tell Canadians what impact such a tax would have on carbon emissions?
Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The pricing of carbon pollution is a key part of any serious plan to address climate change. Pricing pollution is a market mechanism that will reduce emissions and will drive innovation in this country. We believe that provinces and territories are best placed to design pricing systems that work for them as long as it meets the national standard. The design of the system will affect the amount of emissions reductions that are achieved. We will be, as we have said very publicly, reviewing all provincial and territorial systems later this year.
Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
Well, again, no answer. So let's talk about science. How is it a government that claims to be based on science and evidence doesn't have the foggiest clue of how harmful such a carbon tax would be to Canadians? Has the minister not done her homework? Does she not know how much emissions will go down under her carbon tax? Does she not know the devastating impact such a tax will have on our economy and the millions of jobs that hang in the balance? Don't struggling Canadians deserve to know if these massive new taxes will have any impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Canada?
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that addressing climate change is an important issue, and any thoughtful approach and plan includes the pricing of carbon pollution. 4 out of 5 Canadians live in jurisdictions that have shown the leadership to put into place carbon pricing systems. We are working actively with the provinces and territories who have primary responsibility for implementing these systems, and we will continue to do that because addressing climate change is something that we know is an important challenge that they did not address in 10 years in government.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, this week the Commissioner of the Environment tabled an alarming report entitled Perspectives on Climate Change Action. The data was gathered between 2016 and early 2018 on this Liberal government's watch. The findings are clear. The Liberals have no plan. It's just a big show. Their promise on the environment, like in other areas, is another broken promise. Simple question. How much is their carbon tax going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Environment Minister.
Let's be clear, the Commissioner's report actually dealt with the period before the development of the Pan-Canadian Framework. It was an indictment of the climate policies of the previous government. We have put into place a plan that is focused on addressing climate change in a substantive way. The report that was issued in December 2017 by the United Nations showed that relative to the 2016 report, a 232 megaton reduction in carbon emissions. We are taking active and effective measures to ensure that we are addressing climate change in a thoughtful way.
The honourable member for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
What a ridiculous answer. Mr. Speaker, last week the Environment Minister refused to answer a very simple question in committee, so I will give her another chance. It's a truism that environmental programs should have specific and measurable outcomes. We know how much scrubbers on smokestacks reduce SO2. We know how much a wastewater treatment plant will improve water quality. It's shocking that the Liberals don't know how much a carbon tax will reduce emissions. Mr. Speaker, by how much will a $50 a ton carbon tax across Canada reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? And I want a number.
Good question.
Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians recognize very well that the environmental policies of the previous government were an abject failure, whether it was addressing climate change, environmental assessment, biodiversity, and
There's too much noise in the chamber. We have limited time, and so we'll continue again. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Order.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, Canadians know that the environmental policies and the environmental legacy of the previous government was abject failure. They did not address climate change. They destroyed the environmental assessment process in Canada. They let the decline in biodiversity accelerate over the course of the 10 years in power. We are working very actively to ensure that environmental progress and economic progress go together going forward.
The Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Earlier this year, in one of the most shocking and disturbing cases ever witnessed, BC SPCA officers attempted to rescue a severely emaciated dog standing in a pile of mud and feces. The collar was embedded in his neck, causing his head to swell to almost 3 times its normal size. When the collar was removed, it exposed an infected wound showing the dog's trachea and jugular vein. This case of animal cruelty has profoundly impacted my community. In 2016, the Minister of Justice made a commitment to review the animal cruelty provisions of the Criminal Code. I ask when she will honour that commitment.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to first begin by expressing my sympathies to the honourable member and to his community for that loss. Our government believes that animal cruelty is an extremely important social issue that deserves a national conversation. Our government is reviewing issues pertaining to animal cruelty provisions, including expanding the definition of bestiality and the definition of animal fighting in the code. We believe that animal cruelty should be balanced and protect animals from deliberate and unnecessary acts of cruelty while not interfering with legitimate animal use, including Indigenous animal harvesting rights. We look forward to working with the honourable colleague as well as all members of this House to achieve those goals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, the Quebec government had the courage that is lacking here in Ottawa. They decided to charge Quebec sales tax on foreign as well as Canadian digital platforms, including Spotify, Netflix, TuTV, and Illico. The Culture and Media Coalition congratulated the Quebec government, but is asking why Ottawa keeps taxing Quebec cultural companies, but not U.S. multinationals. The Prime Minister has to stop misinforming people. What is the Finance Minister waiting for? Why not do the same? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The way Canadians access content has changed, and that has disrupted a number of business models. The benefits of the digital world are not shared equitably among web broadcasters and artists and creators. That is why we are amending the legislation to adapt to the new digital realities and the broadcasting world. We believe we need to protect our culture and Canadian content on all platforms. Thank you.
Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries awarded a lucrative surf clam quota worth hundreds of millions of dollars to a group that didn't have First Nation partners in place. They weren't incorporated. They didn't have a boat or a vessel or a facility for harvesting. What they did have going for them were Liberal connections, including close family ties to this Liberal caucus. The people of Newfoundland and Labrador want to know why they have to lose their jobs so that this minister can look after Liberal insiders and close family friends.
Clam scandal. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, I hope you'll allow me. This has been my first opportunity to address this member since he's come back. How happy I am to see him in the House in good health. We plan to have dinners with our wives where we'll be able to reflect on how important our families and our health are to doing this job. With regard to this specific issue, when the previous government went through a very similar public process to access this fishery, they forgot to include Indigenous people. Mr. Speaker, our government has not forgotten Indigenous people.
The honourable member for Mégantic-Les-Sables. Mr. Speaker, this government has been a total failure on agriculture. The minister didn't defend them when the health minister revised the food guide, nor did the minister defend them when the Prime Minister had that disastrous trip to India and failed to settle the crisis around pulses. The result is that Canadian exports have dropped by almost 80%. What's the Agriculture Minister waiting for? Why doesn't he call on the Prime Minister to be honest with Canadians, admit that the conspiracy theory is a farce and has disastrous consequences for farmers?
To make sure that the millions of dollars that the Harper government cut from science is renewed. In fact, $100 million in agricultural science over the last two budgets have been implemented. $3 billion for the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, $75 million to increase trade. And I could go on, Mr. Speaker. What this government is going to make sure that the Canadian agriculture expands and meets the $75 billion of exports by 2025. Working with our great farmers and ranchers, we will do that, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter if our producers can't get their products to market and they don't have a market to sell it to. They have to understand there's very real consequences to the Prime Minister's disastrous trip to India. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, let's...
Order. The honourable member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, our pea exports are down 73%, lentils down 79%. India has increased tariffs and are implementing a fumigation fee. The CEO of a major pulse exporter said the trade crisis with India is the ultimate hammer. We have been hit on the head and we are bleeding. For the sake of Canadian pulse producers, will the Agriculture Minister insist the Prime Minister admit his India conspiracy theory is a farce?
Very supportive of the work the government has done to take this issue to the highest level when they went to India, Mr. Speaker. We're very disappointed, Mr. Speaker, in the way that the tariffs were implemented, but we're committed to working with our farmers and processors to make sure our industry grows. We're extremely concerned, as I said, with the way the tariffs were implemented, but we've continued to work with the Indian officials to make sure that we resume the trade in pulses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, on April 2nd, we will celebrate the 11th annual World Autism Awareness Day. On this day, Canada is joining the international community, hundreds of thousands of families and caregivers, and communities around the world that will wear blue in recognition of people living with autism. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health please update the House on the government actions to help those affected by the various forms of autism spectrum disorder?
Good question. The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to begin by thanking my colleague from Dartmouth Cole Harbour for his question and for his leadership on this file. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to supporting Canadians living with autism spectrum disorder. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the compelling advocacy of the member from Edmonton West Niskayuna on this important issue as well. And that's why, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I was disheartened that the Conservatives' recent motion went against our 2018 investment of $20 million in new funding to support people with autism spectrum disorder and their families. And so on World Autism Awareness Day 2018, I would encourage all members of this House and all Canadians to learn more about autism and how each of us can work together to make a difference.
Member for Niagara West.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's wine industry has created over 37,000 jobs. Wine is our highest value-added agricultural product. The U.S. Trade Representative recently said he wants even more access to our Canadian market, despite U.S. wine exports to Canada already increasing by over 2,500% since 1988. And I will also add a $500 million trade surplus. Will the minister confirm that the government will not trade away the 37,000 jobs in our wine industry at the 11th hour with these NAFTA talks?
Mr. Speaker, the U.S. also has measures in place to promote and protect their own wine industry, including limited points of sale. And American wine already does very well in Canada. The U.S. is our largest supplier of imported wines. The priority of this government is to look out for the interests of Canadians and the wine growers, including job creation and trade opportunities in various sectors and other venues. And we will stand up for Canadian industries, specifically the wine industry, and defend our workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, Ottawa can be very far away at times, and that's what Patrick Lagacé wrote in a story a couple of weeks ago about my constituent Sophie Theus. Despite all the efforts by my team and by Sophie herself in the wake of her partner Nicholas's tragic death, she still doesn't have her permanent residence status, even though it had been approved already. The Prime Minister boasts about how compassionate his immigration system is, so will the Minister finally exercise his discretion and put an end to this suffering and allow Sophie to grieve and move on? The Honourable Immigration Minister.
On respect for rules and standards, but also there is room for compassion and humanitarian considerations with respect to any particular case. The member opposite knows that I can't go into the details of a particular case due to privacy concerns, but I'm happy to meet with him at the end of question period to see what I can do to help him. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to their health, women have the right to choice. A big part of women's health is access to a whole range of safe and effective contraceptives. However, the current public service health care plan only covers oral contraceptives.
What has the government done to correct this situation for more than 650,000 federal public servants and their family members? Merci.
The Honourable Parliament Secretary, the Minister, President of the Treasury Board.
I'd like to thank the member for her question and her hard work.
Respecting their rights, including reproductive health rights, is what our government does. In the public service, that means we're putting women and their health of women first, including their choice of contraceptives. I'm very happy to announce that effective April 1st, non-oral contraceptives will be covered under the Public Service Healthcare Plan. And as promised, we worked hard and collaboratively with the unions to bring this about, and we have delivered.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians love the national anthem, O Canada, but unfortunately in recent months I've noticed that Radio-Canada and CBC are no longer playing the national anthem at 5 a.m. And why? They told me it's because they now broadcast 24 hours a day. But that's been the case since 2015, and they only stopped playing the national anthem a few months ago. Does the government agree with me that 1 minute per day is not too much to ask for to play the national anthem? It's not just a requirement, it's desirable. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I appreciate the question, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to point out, in defense of CBC, we reinvested $675 million in the public broadcaster, and we're always proud of the fact that under Maurice Bélanger, the words to the national anthem were changed to include women, because that's a good thing for everyone. Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we tried to better protect our girls by speeding up the passage of C-38, a bill by this government to combat procuring. We liked C-452 better, but the Prime Minister flip-flopped. And now the Liberals, with Conservative complicity, voted down our motion to crack down on pimps. The Liberals and Conservatives prefer the status quo to protecting our daughters. How can the government justify its refusal to accelerate passage of its very own bill? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Justice Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question.
Trafficking is one of the most heinous crimes imaginable, and our government is working to combat it in many ways. We're committed to strengthening its efforts to combat and to better protect the victims of this crime. Bill C-38 proposes to give law enforcement and prosecutors new tools to investigate and prosecute human trafficking offences that can be particularly difficult to prove. Our government is committed to advancing this legislation, and we look forward to receiving support on its passage into law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today, a Canadian company, indeed a Victoria, BC company called Aggregate IQ, has been the subject of debate in the Palace of Westminster. Our parliamentary colleagues there are hearing that this company played a significant role in manipulating data to affect the vote on the Brexit referendum. I want to know if the Minister of Justice or any of the relevant ministers can decide that we can help get to the bottom of this kind of shenanigan. It's illegal. It should be illegal. Can we get an inquiry into the activities of Aggregate IQ?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary for Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, our government takes its fundamental responsibility to protect the private information of Canadian citizens and the integrity of our electoral systems extremely seriously, which is why we engaged the Communications Security Establishment to conduct the first ever threat assessment of Canadian democratic processes. The threat assessment looked at cyber threats facing our democratic process, and it's a critical step in addressing the potential issues Canadians may face. Happily, CSE found that there was no significant interference in the 2015 election, but we know that this is going to change in 2019, and that addressing this will take a whole-of-government approach. This is an issue that we take extremely seriously, which is why Budget 2018 committed over $750 million for...
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've asked several questions in this House regarding the promised changes to the Nutrition North program that the Minister has publicly stated is failing Northerners. Last May, the response was that the new program would be launched very soon. In September, the response changed to, we intend to get it right this time. In December, we were considering all feedback. Mr. Speaker, in Budget 2018, not one mention of Nutrition North. It seems that more time, there's less progress. Why is the government continuing to fail Nunavut Youth by not fixing this broken program?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his advocacy on this issue. It is completely unacceptable that Northerners are still struggling to feed their families and pay the most extraordinary prices for food in Canada. Our government has already expanded the Nutrition North program to include 37 more communities across Canada. We have also increased the budget by $65 million over the next 5 years, and we are continuing to engage with those in northern regions to ensure that we can expand this program to ensure affordable access to food for all people in northern regions of Canada.
This will conclude the question period for today. See, the honourable member for Louis-Saint-Laurent.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Radio-Canada is no longer broadcasting Le Haut-Canada. I made an access to information request, and I'd like to table this document that gives the answers of Radio-Canada explaining why they no longer broadcast O-Canada on Radio-Canada and CBC. The honourable member for Louis-Saint-Laurent, does he have unanimous consent to table the document? There is no unanimous consent.
Tabling of documents, dépôt de documents. Pursuant to Section 79(2)(2) of the Parliament of Canada Act, it's my duty to present to the House a report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer entitled Status Report on Phase 1 of the new Infrastructure Plan. Tabling of documents, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have the honour of tabling in both official languages 3 treaties, an amendment to Annex 3 on the process regarding dangerous pesticides passed in Geneva on April 24th. Second, a protocol to amend the agreement between Canada and the United States, dated February 18th, 2014. Third, an agreement on air transport between Canada and Colombia. An explanation accompanies each treaty.
Tabling of documents, dépôt de documents, l'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36(8), I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's response to one petition. Again, while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 109 of the House of Commons, I have the honour to present in both official languages the government's response to the 48th report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs entitled Support for Members of Parliament with Young Children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents, dépôt de documents. Introduction of government bills. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, seconded by Mr. Champagne, moves for leave to introduce, Mr. Champagne, leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Code, the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and other acts, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. The motion is deemed adopted. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, seconded by Mr. Champagne, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
And when shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Déclaration du ministre. L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to table in both official languages a charter statement with respect to Bill C-75, an act to amend the Criminal Code, Youth Criminal Justice Act, and other acts, and make consequential amendments to other acts.
The Ministre. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. The Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the standing orders, I have the honour of tabling of both official languages the report of the Canadian delegation of the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Association.
At the 2017 spring session held in Tbilisi, Georgia from May 26 to 29, 2017.
Rapport de délégation interparlementaire.
Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Presenting reports from committees.
The Honourable Member for Don Valley North.
Don Valley West. Monsieur le Président, j'ai l'honneur de présenter.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour of tabling in both official languages the 18th report of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, called Road to Recovery, Resettlement, Issues of Yazidi Women and Children in Canada.
9, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to this report. Mr. Speaker, I might just add that there are 2 very good supplementary reports from the opposition parties which have been very helpful in this debate, and I commend the whole committee for their responsible action in this report. Thank you.
As I understand, there will be a dissident opinion from the Honourable Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
The Conservative Party will append a dissenting report to this report, given that we do not feel that the report covers all of the recommendations included in the UN standing report that was issued in 2015 entitled They Came to Destroy. It also doesn't provide a comprehensive enough set of recommendations to address the crisis that resettled Yazidi women face here in Canada. Thank you.
Presenting reports from committees. The Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour to present in both official languages the 8th report of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities, entitled Advancing Inclusion and Quality of Life for Seniors. Pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to this report. And while I have the floor, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank all members of the committee, the staff, the clerk, all the analysts, and anyone involved in producing this fantastic report. Thank you, sir.
And again, I understand there is a dissenting report on this one. The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative members on the committee want to thank the chair for the work that the committee did, but unfortunately did not go far enough, and so there was a supplementary report that is part of this report that is called Not Good Enough, and one of the major focuses is calling on the government to appoint a Minister for Seniors. Thank you.
Presenting reports from committees. Introduction of private members' bills. Dépôt de projet de loi émanant des députés. First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. Motion. Motion. Under motions, the Honourable Member for Don Valley North.
Don Valley West, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion, that the 14th report of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration presented to the House on Thursday, November 9th, 2017, be amended by replacing the name of the organization Talent Beyond Borders to Talent Beyond Boundaries.
Does the Honourable Member for Don Valley North have the unanimous consent of the House to propose this motion? The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Motions. Motion. Presenting petitions. Présentation de pétitions. The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a petition to the House on protecting faith-based employers from discrimination under the Canada Summer Jobs Program. It's calling on the Liberal government to stop discriminating against people who believe in legal protection for preborn children and traditional sexual morality. And it's saying that if Canadians are not allowed to have different political beliefs than the government and have their funding cut off, that is discrimination. And so I ask the government to consider it, and promptly so.
Presenting petitions. Présentation de pétitions. L'honorable député de Brome.
The honourable member for Brome-Missisquoi. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition presented by my fellow citizens from Lac-Memphremagog regarding the quality of the water in that lake. Sherbrooke and Magog drinks the water from this lake, but this lake, as you know, has part of its waters in Canada and in the United States. On the American side, it's not drinkable, and on the Canadian side, it's drinkable water. It makes no sense. We ask the Minister of Global Affairs to consult the relevant committee to look at the quality of water. There's waste being thrown into the lake, and that raises issues. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
I'm pleased again to table a petition from Edmontonians demanding the government to take action that every vote count. They're concerned that in a democracy, every vote and every voter should count. Frequently, our broken electoral system allows the party to win 100% of the power with less than 40% of the vote. The Liberal government has promised to change our electoral system, but time is running out if we want a fairer system before the next election. They call on the government to adopt a fair, proportional voting system so Parliament of Canada actually reflects how electors voted.
Presenting petitions. The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Honour today to present a petition on behalf of over 16,000 Canadians and indeed all the members of the Conservative Hunting and Angling Caucus, asking that the government require individuals appointed to the Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee had earned their possession and acquisition license, without which they lack a baseline understanding of the activities that they are tasked with regulating. This is a common sense request that we hope the government will grant.
Hear, hear. Presenting petitions, the honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to present on behalf of dozens of constituents in New Westminster Burnaby, as well as dozens of other citizens in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, a petition that has been sponsored and has recruited hundreds of signatures across this country by the good activists of the Acorn Community Organization. This petition seeks to make banking fair and end predatory lending in Canada by limiting interest rates that can be charged, lowering the interest rate that exists under the Criminal Code, the maximum interest rate that one can charge, creating a national anti-predatory lending strategy, and supporting alternatives to predatory lenders, such as postal banking and credit union products. Mr. Speaker, as you well know, lower-income Canadians often do not have access to the banking system. About 20% of Canadians do not have access to banking at all, or have very little access in their community to banking. By ending predatory lending and making banking fair, we're providing more support to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, there are literally hundreds of thousands of people that come to visit Canada every year. I have a petition signed by constituents that are raising the issue of the super visa and wanting to get the government to provide additional clarification on when someone gets the super visa, they return to the country of their home, and then they want to come back, that in fact, if it's not stamped, whether or not it's good for 2 years or they have to leave the country in 6 months. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Calgary Confederation.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to present a petition in support of my private member's bill, Bill C-316, which was submitted by members of the National Capital Region Gift of Life Network. Coincidentally, it is also tax season across Canada, Mr. Speaker. The petitioners are calling on this House to improve Canada's organ donation system, and this would be achieved by making the process to register as an organ donor easier by adding a simple question to our annual tax returns. With 4,700 Canadians awaiting a life-saving transplant,
Imagine how many lives we could have saved if this was already in place for this tax season. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, it's a huge honour to rise today to table e-petition 1344 that has 4,247 signatories in support of my bill, Bill C-312, to create a national cycling strategy. Mr. Speaker, with soaring infrastructure and healthcare costs, increased amount of air contaminants, greenhouse gas emissions, traffic congestion, the petitioners are calling on the government to create a strategy that will set clear targets so that we can become a cycling nation, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to our children, most importantly, in 2016, in the participation report card on physical activity for children, we had a grade of an F, Mr. Speaker. And in Canada, only 2% of children are riding their bikes to school. In Germany, it's 15%. In Sweden, it's 20%. In Denmark, it's 40%. And in the Netherlands, it's 50%. And Mr. Speaker, we can get there if we create a plan, set clear targets. We can be a cycling nation, Mr. Speaker.
Just remind all honourable members in presenting petitions not to weigh in with their own particular views on the matter. Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise this afternoon to present two petitions. The first is an e-petition, and it's calling on the government and the House of Commons to recognize the ecological crisis, to recognize the interwoven nature of the social, economic, and ecological crisis, and to advance environmental education. And specifically, the petitioners petition this House to take a leadership role in a Canadian strategy to support educators, communicators, and community leaders, and furthermore, to recognize that fresh air, clean water, and healthy food are human rights in Canada. The second petition, Mr. Speaker, is from numerous citizens and residents of Saanich Gulf Islands, again raising the issue of the threat to the global shark species that is embedded in the trade in shark fins and the cultural practice of shark fin soup. The petitioners call on the government not just to, as we currently do, forbid the finning of sharks in Canadian waters, but ban the trade and importation and sale of shark fins in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member, l'honorable député de Pierrefonds-Dollard.
The honourable member.
Petition from the Filipino-Canadian Association of the West Island of Montreal. FCOWI, as they're commonly known, has as a mission statement to create communities in our neighbourhoods. And they do so under the Filipino custom of Bayou Nihan. Mr. Speaker, FCOWI does this by having social, cultural, and educational activities. They also have sports activities, and on that front I can tell you they're excellent basketball players. Under the leadership of their president, Mr. Adair Bolson, they prepared this petition asking the Government of Canada to recognize the month of June as Filipino Heritage Month, and on their behalf I am very proud to present this petition to the House.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Speaker, and I have a petition in support of free prescription birth control. And the petitioners want to draw the House's attention to the fact that among heterosexual sexual activity among Canadians, only 15% 15% have no access to contraception, and 24% of Canadians don't have access to a subsidized drug plan. That means they have to pay a great deal out of pocket. And provision of subsidized contraceptions in places like the U.S. and Great Britain has shown a considerable reduction in terms of cost benefits and the costs of unintended pregnancy. And so these petitioners ask the Government of Canada to support my motion, M65, that calls on the federal government to work with the provinces to cover the full cost of prescribed contraceptions. And in keeping with petitions, I have a second from petitioners who want to draw attention to the House in regard to Via Rail and its management. Via does not have a long-term plan and direction approved by government. and can unilaterally end services and the route and affect thousands of Canadians. And this increases the cost of rail travel, and it's an impact that is very negative for our environment. So they call on the Government of Canada to support my private member's bill, C-370, to establish a clear mandate for Via Rail. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad we're actually able to present petitions today and not move to orders of the day. I have two petitions to present to the House. The first one is recognizing the need to develop and implement a national strategy to reduce poverty in Canada, and so therefore the petitioners are calling on the government to make poverty reduction a priority, to develop many thousands of social housing units, and so on. The second petition, Mr. Speaker, has to deal with the Native Women's Association of Canada. The petitioners are calling upon the Parliament of Canada to make sure that it receives sufficient funding to continue its important work protecting women through its Sisters in Spirit initiative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm tabling a petition today that relates to an issue raised in my private member's bill, C-350. It's a private member's bill that creates an opportunity for the House to do more to combat forced organ harvesting around the world. It's actually the same bill that was originally proposed by Irwin Cotler in a previous parliament, so I hope that that bill, C-350, will have widespread support. This is a petition specifically calling to the attention of the House issues of human rights abuse in China and the issue, a number of issues affecting Falun Gong practitioners, and in particular as well the mass murder of innocent Falun Gong practitioners and the harvesting of their organs. This is an issue that Canada and the rest of the international community needs to do more to combat.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two petitions to table today. I offer to the House a petition gathered by the good folks at ACORN, a community organization. They gathered hundreds of signatures from people from Ontario, calling because especially low-income people have difficulty accessing banking service, and because they're particularly susceptible to predatory lending from payday loan outlets. The payday loan industry, they say, is worth an estimated $2.5 billion annually. That profit is all coming out of the pockets of the people that can least afford it. And the petitioners so call on the House of Commons to do a number of things in their federally regulated approach to banking, to provide access to low-interest credit card credit for emergencies, lower fees on overdraft protection, but particularly to offer alternatives to conventional banking, for example, postal banking. I would urge the Parliament to consider.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Honourable Member has a second one. Pardon me, the Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Petitioners from Gabriola Island urge the Transport Minister to reject the application for 5 bulk commercial anchorages off a sensitive shoreline of our coast, the island where I also live. Petitioners cite the potential from the project to have adverse impacts on sport fishing, on spawning beds, on wetlands. The risk is extreme for our community with no benefit whatsoever. The bulk anchorages application should be rejected.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Vancouver, Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The late Jack Layton raised a lot of attention to the practices of banks in this country, and particularly the impact that banking practices have on poor people and people of limited income, seniors, young people, Indigenous people, people that live in communities that are not well served by the conventional banking system. And so I'm pleased to rise in this House and present a petition that's been assisted by the good people at ACORN, community organization, that calls on this House to examine banking practices to better ensure that people on low income and people who don't have access to conventional banking services are treated fairly in this country. They point out that NSF fees on a $100 bounce check can cost $45 to $48 depending on the bank, and interest on a 100-day payday loan could cost $15 or $25 depending on the province. These kind of oppressive fees charged to people who can afford them lease is something that should be of concern to this Parliament and all members in it, and I hope that members of the House and the government listens to these concerns and takes action as soon as possible.
Say presenting petitions, but we only have 20 seconds left, so nope. Okay, we're going to questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if the government's response to question 1484 to question 1510 could be made for orders for return, these returns would be tabled immediately.
Is it the pleasure of the House that the aforementioned questions be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately? Yes? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all remaining questions be allowed to stand at this time, please.
And is that also agreed? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. We'll go now to the usual Thursday question and invite the Honourable respective House Leaders, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the House for the Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we weren't quite sure if we were going to get a Thursday question because we know today's a Friday, but it actually is Thursday. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. I do want to, while I'm on my feet, wish all of my colleagues and everyone a good 2-week constituency break and a happy Easter and a joyous Easter. And I would also like to ask the Government House Leader if she could let us know what we're going to be doing when we return after the April break. Thank you.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon, the House will continue second reading debate of Bill C-68 concerning the Fisheries Act. The House will then adjourn for the Easter break and allow members to return to work in their constituencies and also to spend some time with family and friends. Upon our return on April 16th, we will commence second reading debate Bill C-74, the Budget Implementation Act, and continue that debate for the remainder of the week. Je veux prendre cette occasion.
I'd like to take this opportunity to also wish all colleagues and their families, everyone working here and who helps us, a happy Easter and a good break. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chair is now prepared to rule on the point of order raised on March 21st, 2018 by the Honourable Member for Carleton concerning information provided to the House by the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. I'd like to thank the member for Carleton for having raised this matter. The member for Carleton explained that a report of the Parliamentary Budget Officer tabled in the House stated that no plan existed for the government's expenditure of $186.7 billion on infrastructure, but that, conversely, the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities stated during oral questions on March 21st that such a plan did exist. The member argued that if such a plan existed and the Parliamentary Budget Officer had been denied it, the government would be in contempt. But if the plan did not exist, then the minister had provided false information to the House. In essence, the Chair is being asked to weigh in about the correctness or exactness of the answer provided by the minister to the House. Members are, of course, aware of the well-defined limits that are placed on the Chair in this respect. As such, the Chair cannot unilaterally assume a role in the interpretation of these facts or, more particularly, decide even if the plan alluded to by the Minister is the same plan that is referred to in the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, Budget 2018, Issues for Parliamentarians, which was tabled in the House on March 19th. Un autre comme le président précédent.
Additionally, as the previous speaker reminded the House on April 30th, 2014, at page 4753 of the debates, quote, "It is not sufficient for members to simply make allegations based on their perceptions of what is or is not factually correct. Members must recognize and accept the existence of differences of fact and interpretation, which have always been a part of the normal cut and thrust of debate and question period." End of quote. Thus, any question concerning the existence of infrastructure plans is better defined as debate.
Notes that this matter also speaks to the unwavering need for accuracy and clarity in the information that members of Parliament receive, as well as the need for those providing that information to shoulder this responsibility in a serious and consistent way. The House would be well served by this being remembered in all exchanges of information. I thank honourable members for their attention. Orders of the day. Ordre du jour.
Government orders, government bills, comments.
Bill C-68, an act to amend the Fisheries Act and other acts in consequence.
When the House last took up debate on the question, the honourable member for St. John's East was about to start a question and comment period of 5 minutes. We'll start with that now, and the honourable member for St. John's East.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no question or comment yet put to me, but I'm happy to entertain anyone that would come forward.
Sorry, I probably didn't start that in the correct fashion. We'll ask for questions and comments for the honourable member for St. John's East. Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to advance a question in relation to just how important it is that we have this legislation. We often talk about the importance of issues that face our constituents. This is one of those issues in which, if not directly, indirectly, it has an impact on all of us. And I'm wondering if my friend and colleague across the way could just kind of expand as to why he believes that it's really important that this legislation actually pass.
Member for St. John's East.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his open-ended question that allows me to continue on with my earlier remarks, frankly. And the whole, one of the main pillars of our election campaign was to revisit the nature in which environmental assessment and protection of our natural resources are undertaken in Canada. And in that context, there was review of transportation, natural resources, environment and climate change, and also the Fisheries Act. And so when I look at the Bill C-68, I consider it in the context of changes that are also put forward and with respect to the SEA legislation. I look to it in the context of the broader national consultation that was undertaken with respect to the NEB, the offshore petroleum boards, the SEA process generally, and of course our international obligations and our commitment to protect 10% of offshore resources under our ACCI targets. And so this is really a national undertaking. Although when people think of fisheries in Canada, they think of the North, they think of British Columbia, they think of the Great Lakes, they think of Quebec and the Maritime provinces, and then of course Newfoundland and Labrador, it's really the sum of what makes Canadians Canadians is understanding that we have a place in the world, we have a role in protecting our natural resources, and there are changes in this legislation that both allow us to protect our national resources, but also to develop them sustainably so that we can enjoy the high standards of living that we do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to ask the Honourable colleague from, who's a Member of Parliament from Newfoundland. I visited Grand Bank just the other day, and I spoke with many of the families that are going to be impacted by the Minister's decision to award a lucrative surf clam quota to one of his Liberal colleagues' brothers. That is going to indeed mean job losses and layoffs within the town of Grand Bank. And the messages that we got were, we don't want EI, we want to work. They want to know where their members of Parliament are. And so we've heard from the Prime Minister, we've heard from the Minister, we've heard from the Parliamentary Secretary. So I'm going to give this Member of Parliament from St. John's, Newfoundland, an opportunity to provide comments to those friends and family from Grand Bank that are listening in on the Minister's decision to arbitrarily take away their livelihoods and award it to others, and indeed one of their Liberal colleagues' brothers, a lucrative surf clam quota worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Thank you.
Member for St. John's East.
I'd like to thank the member for Caribou, Prince George, for giving me this opportunity. Normally, the Newfoundland and Labrador caucus team works together, and normally we'll look to the member for Bonavista Buren Trinity to lead us on this topic, but I'm happy to provide comments. Nobody has been a stronger advocate for his area than that member. He's been there. He worked hard on the issue during the campaign. He's been advocating hard with us throughout his census election. There are many species that can be processed in the plant in Grand Bank. I understand that for this year, given the timing of the decision, there should be no change. The company that currently holds the quotas for processing of surf clam does about half of its processing there, half of its processing in Nova Scotia. We're well appraised of that issue, and that
I want to remind the honourable members that when they're heckling across the floor, it's annoying. When they're heckling right next to the person who's speaking, I would kind of venture and say it might be unparliamentary. So I'll just leave it to the individual members to kind of muzzle themselves and respect the others who are speaking. The honourable member for St. John's East.
And so, at least for this fishing season, my understanding from our meetings and our consultations with the department and with the minister, there's unlikely to be any change. So I do want to reassure the people of Grand Bank, many of whom I know. I spend most of my summers traveling back and forth to the Burin Peninsula playing soccer. Many people from the Burin Peninsula have moved into St. John's to pursue their livelihoods, and we're all a family in this. We want to see other opportunities arise for exploitation of the fishery in that area. But one of the pillars of this change is to examine the monopolies that exist in our fishery and to make sure that Indigenous people have a fair opportunity to participate. That hadn't happened to date. These changes allow that, and although I perhaps would have preferred other proponents, as it turns out, I didn't have access to all the information. The minister assures us that the most beneficial proposal to Indigenous people was selected, and I trust the minister. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a day that the citizens of West Vancouver Sunshine Coast Sea to Sky Country have been working toward and waiting for. Bill C-68 is an act to amend the Fisheries Act and other acts in consequence. The consultation effort itself has strengthened engagement with Canadians, enhanced transparency in fisheries activities, and improved the health of fish and fish habitat. And we are just getting started. This new legislation and our debate will go a long way to help restore and strengthen the public trust so badly damaged by the previous government with regard to the Fisheries Act. In 2016, our government initiated a consultation process that engaged thousands of Canadians. Citizens expressed grave concern about lost protections. They spoke out about the importance of science and academic freedom. Indigenous peoples offered voices of experience, traditional knowledge, and ways of working together that we have been missing. Commercial fishers say they want to be included in decision-making. The amendments we are debating today fundamentally recognize that decisions must be guided by the principles of sustainability, by the precautionary principle, and by an ecosystem management approach. This provides hope to many British Columbians for whom Roderick Haig Brown, named in Campbell River this summer as a person of national significance to Canada, is a source of inspiration, a guide, and a mentor. He wrote, quote, "The salmon runs are, in truth, the wealth of the Pacific Ocean brought readily back to the hand and use of man. For his part, man has used them and abused them, injured and restored them. He knows enough to multiply them even beyond their original abundance, and he is threatening them with total destruction." Haig Brown wrote this in 1959, almost 60 years ago. I take his words very seriously. Fundamental to a robust Fisheries Act, important amendments include protection for all fish and fish habitats at last, restoring the previous prohibition against harmful alteration, disruption, or destruction of fish habitat, known as HAD. These protections were taken as immutable, and yet they were stricken from the legislation in an act of callous disregard by the previous government. I'm very grateful to the many who fought for this to be put back into the Fisheries Act. Important other amendments include that Indigenous traditional knowledge will inform decisions that impact habitat. The legislation will strengthen the role of Indigenous peoples in project reviews, monitoring, and policy development, and will honour traditional knowledge. It will put short-term measures in place to respond to threats to fish that may suddenly arise. It restores a prohibition against causing the death of fish by means other than fishing. It provides full transparency for projects, including a public registry of projects. The Act promotes restoration of degraded habitat and the rebuilding of depleted fish stocks and strengthens the long-term protection of marine refuges. The Act clarifies and updates enforcement powers to address emerging fisheries issues and to align current provisions in other legislation. Of course, Bill C-68 demonstrates that our government is proactive in protecting wild salmon stocks and the diversity of fish and fish habitat in Canada. It is vital that we support and pass this legislation. We need every aspect of Bill C-68 badly. And also, we need to look ahead and be visionary by drafting a separate but related National Aquaculture Act. A National Aquaculture Act would facilitate a regional approach to aquaculture and should include how we can transition away from open net pens to closed containment salmon aquaculture on the west coast of Canada. In collaboration with Indigenous peoples, the Government of British Columbia, hundreds of stewardship groups, and industry, a National Aquaculture Act provides a way to ensure an increasingly profitable and productive aquaculture industry. On behalf of many on the West Coast, I am here to represent the view that it is time to transition British Columbia's open net pen salmon aquaculture industry to closed containment. Momentum is gathering globally and close to home to develop a profitable, productive aquaculture system and sector through closed containment. In Washington State, a bill has just passed through the Senate to phase out open net salmon aquaculture by 2025. As licenses expire, they are not being renewed. If an operation is in violation of the lease, it is shut down. Senator Kevin Ranker introduced the bill. I spoke with him, and he has said he's never seen anything like the support that came together from all 29 treaty tribes in the state, from commercial fishers and recreational fishers. Senator Ranker's constituency is the same of many of ours in British Columbia in this House, because it encompasses, in Senator Ranker's words, the magical, majestic Salish Sea. From a business perspective, the global open net pen salmon aquaculture industry is operating in an increasingly unpredictable environment. The biological costs to control sea lice and viruses are rising. The industry is not able to control stock losses or escapes. Licenses are very difficult, if not impossible, to secure. Public support for the status quo is attenuating, and capital is being actively invested in closed containment facilities globally. Governments are paying attention. From an environmental perspective, there's evidence that sea lice and viruses are transferred from farmed fish to wild salmon stocks. Norway has put a moratorium on open net farms due to the sea lice problem. Add to that the recent complete net pen collapse in Washington State, and it is obvious that we simply cannot stand by and allow these threats to wild salmon and wild salmon habitat continue. From a trade perspective, British Columbia and Canada should also not concede our strong role in the industry, our knowledge, and our brand to the first movers who know that the status quo will simply not allow for the growth of the sector and who are gaining market advantage over us through research, innovation, and investment. Canada is a trusted global leader in high-value, safe, secure, sustainable food, and we have the potential to develop our agri-food sector, particularly in light of recent trade agreements and supercluster announcements. Through technology and innovation in the sector, Canada can bring more high-quality farmed salmon to global markets, create jobs, and strengthen the economy. Social innovation presents the potential for industry and First Nations to be enterprise partners. Transitioning to closed containment is a way for nation-to-nation collaboration in pursuit of business opportunity, trade, and a healthy aquatic environment. In just 2.5 years, our government has made it clear through our actions that we are committed to strengthening engagement and transparency and to rebuilding trust with Canadians. Last year, the government invested $1.4 billion in the Department of Fisheries, Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard in their base budget as a result of a program integrity review which revealed the magnitude and devastation of the Harper government cuts. This is in addition to our historic $1.5 billion investment in the Oceans Protection Plan to further protect the marine environment from coast to coast to coast. As the Minister has stated, to preserve, protect, and help restore our environment, we need a Fisheries Act that Canadians can trust. We must continue to build a relationship based on respect for the protection of our shared environment. And I would like to thank Canadian citizens for their ongoing commitment to volunteering, studying the science, advocating, and leading. Certainly, the people of West Vancouver Sunshine Coast Sea to Sky Country have played a major role in the proposed Fishery Act legislation we are considering today, and that will continue, no doubt. I am very grateful for their wisdom and spirit and tenacity in getting us to today. Our government is taking great strides to protect fish and fish habitat and the environment. To my colleagues in the House, please join me in supporting these important amendments and in passing Bill C-68. And then let us take the next step toward a National Aquaculture Act. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
In comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to be able to ask a question on Bill C-68. This is only less than 7 hours of debate only allowed on this really important piece of legislation, limited by the Liberal government. I'm very sorry that we've had a closure invoked on this. However, I want to ask through you, my colleague, about the Cohen Commission recommendations. I know for her, as in my riding, this was a very hot election issue. Coastal people are passionate about wild salmon, and we're very encouraged in particular by this government's, the Liberal government's commitment to implement Cohen Commission recommendations, and specifically in the mandate letter to the Fisheries Minister, a specific instruction to implement Cohen recommendations. Now, recommendation number 3 was to break the conflict of interest, which has been repeatedly observed to Department of Fisheries and Oceans, that it is both the regulator of the salmon industry, protector of wild salmon, but also the promoter of the farmed salmon industry, and that those are in conflict, certainly in conflict, but certainly wild salmon and farmed salmon. Open net pen Atlantic salmon farming is a conflict with Pacific wild salmon. So I'd like to hear my colleagues' comments about whether she shares my concern that this government has still failed to act on Cohen Commission Recommendation 3.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my honourable colleague. There's nothing that would make me more happy than to talk about the Cohen Commission. We fought hard when the Conservative government completely did the study and then threw it out the window. We fought to have this in our campaign platform, and I'm very pleased to announce that of the 75 Cohen Commission recommendations, I believe we have achieved 64, as well as wild salmon policy, which is so important. The honourable member raises the issue of open net fish farms and versus wild salmon, and that's of course why it is imperative that we pass the Fisheries Act and then we move to a National Aquaculture Act. Thank you very much.
And comments. The honourable member for Burnaby North. Yes.
I'd like to thank my honourable colleague, my neighbour on the North Shore, for her speech, but also for her lifetime of advocacy when it comes to issues revolving around fish. She mentioned in her speech, and I was disappointed actually in previous debates this week as I saw Conservative after Conservative member stand up and say that they no longer believe in the precautionary principle. I guess actions speak louder than words, though, because we've all lived through the effect of the enormous cuts that were felt by the previous government. She mentioned that we've invested $1.5 billion in the Oceans Protection Plan, $1.4 in the core mandate of the fishery. Could she give us some details on how those investments are affecting her specific community?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague and for the role he plays as Parliamentary Secretary. Certainly, the West Coast is deeply engaged in this issue. What our government has done, first of all, is to examine the horrendous cuts made by the Conservative government in order that the Fisheries Department can do basic work. That has been restored to the tune of $1.4 billion. But really, that just puts back what we had before. There is so much more to do, and taking an ecosystem management approach and using the precautionary principle is, of course, fundamental to that. But you have communities from coast to coast to coast who know what goes on in our rivers and creeks and intertidal zones and estuaries, who volunteer hundreds of thousands of hours to ensure that we are always maintaining fish habitat for the benefit of obviously all ocean life. With this funding, groups have been able to get back to the work that is their life and that makes our communities what they are. With regard to the Oceans Protection Plan, of course, we are putting in protections so that we can balance the environment and the economy in the way in which Canadians expect us to. Thank you very much.
Resuming debate. Before resuming debate, I believe we have a point of order. The honourable member for Cowichan Malahat Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been discussions among the parties, and I believe if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. that the membership of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs be amended as follows. Mr. David Christopherson, the Member of Parliament for Hamilton Centre, for Mr. Kennedy Stewart, the Member for Burnaby South. Thank you.
Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. Very good. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Cowichan Malahat Langford. Sorry, the honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe. I'm seeing.
Never to be confused with the member for Cowichan Malahat, Mr. Speaker. But I'm very, very pleased to rise in my place today and talk about this important issue. And nice to see an injustice done to a fellow colleague undone just before I speak on this particular issue. Mr. Speaker, I was elected to this chamber in 2006. At that time, I was the Member of Parliament, proud Member of Parliament for a constituency then known as Wetaskiwin, a large rural area between Red Deer and Edmonton. And one of the biggest concerns that I heard at that time was from all of my municipal reeves and councillors who said that the onerous and very expensive, time-consuming process of doing something as simple as replacing a culvert under a gravel road out in one of the hinterlands of these counties, and some of these counties, Clearwater County represents a massive, massive tract of land, very few people in the eastern portion of that county, massive roads, Forestry Service roads, trunk roads, all kinds of roads, constant little streams and so on in the foothills, lots of small bridges, lots of culverts. The same thing could be said for Lacombe County, Ponoka County, Wetaskiwin County, Leduc County, virtually any county or municipal district in Alberta. And of course, this would be the same for virtually any county or municipal district across the prairies or anywhere else in the country for that matter. As a matter of fact, the Alberta, the AAMD&C, the Alberta Association of Municipalities and Districts, I know this, that SARM in Saskatchewan and the various other organizations, all the way up to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, had the onerous and odious situation of dealing with the Fisheries Act, particularly the habitat alteration, damage and destruction clauses and the implementation thereof, were simply causing numerous delays where fisheries officers would show up almost, I think the terms we use, they'd show up with guns drawn to a construction site where a couple of county workers and a contractor might be there trying to fix a culvert or try to unplug something, because these are the situations that these folks face on a daily basis in our vast rural areas. And of course, moving back, regressively taking this legislation back, and we just heard the previous parliamentary secretary talk about how they're going back to the way it was before, is simply another attack and another assault on a legacy of assaults that are happening right now on our rural communities across this country, whether it's regressing back on the firearms legislation, whether it's the carbon tax, all of the environmental legislation, getting rid of the National Energy Board, imposing a tanker ban off the West Coast, cancelling pipeline projects like Northern Gateway, changing the goalposts so many times on development projects that companies pull out of the projects that they've spent years and years developing, that had prior approval from very competent authorities set up under legislation, and we're just seeming to go backwards. So, Mr. Speaker, my previous experience, I have a degree in zoology, fisheries and aquatic sciences from the University of Alberta. I don't want to date myself by saying when that happened, but it was a long time ago. And I worked proudly for a number of years for Alberta Fish and Wildlife, doing walleye minimum size limit experiments and working with DFO when I was a fishing guide in the Arctic, and know intimately some of the issues that are facing our country. I was an enforcement officer as a national park warden, and as a conservation officer, park ranger for the province of Alberta. I enforced the Fisheries Act, I enforced the fisheries regulations therein, so I have a little bit of knowledge about what I'm talking about. I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that the Conservative Party doesn't believe that we should be protecting our fisheries, protecting the environment, and making sure that we have sustainable development going forward. That's simply not the case. In Alberta, you know, some of the most active conservationists are people who work in the energy sector, people who work in the oil patch, people who work in the rural areas, people who work in the forestry industries and come out of our cities, come out of Edmonton, come out of Calgary. May Long weekend is coming up, and the entire West Country in Alberta is going to fill right up. There's going to be 40 or 50,000 people in Clearwater County alone over May long weekend. They're going to be fishing in the Ram River. They're going to be fishing in all the little lakes that we have out there, and they're going to be enjoying themselves. These people go to work every day, and they understand that they can get the balance right. And what they don't understand is legislation that keeps on coming from Liberal governments past and present that denies them the opportunity, the livelihoods that allow them to actually go out and enjoy the environment by preventing energy projects from going forward, by preventing all kinds of development. We have so much capital flight happening right now. The lack of foreign investment in Canada is striking. The government says that they've got all this economic growth. It's propped up by deficits. If they actually believed anything that they said over there, they would have no trouble balancing a budget in so-called economic good times. The people of Canada have everything to fear from a government that says everything's going well and can't balance the books, Mr. Speaker, but that's a different debate for another day. I want to talk about this Fisheries Act and the onerous provisions that will be coming back on our counties. Well, so what does this mean? This means that our counties and our ratepayers in our municipal areas are going to have to pay, what, 3, 4, 5 times as much to replace a culvert, to repair a bridge in their communities. They're going to face delays. They're going to face road closures as a result of these delays and the enhanced enforcement. I tell you what, to my Liberal colleagues, you want to lose all your rural seats in the prairies? Oh yeah, you don't have any. Here's why. Because after years and years and years of not listening, when fisheries officers show up, guns drawn, for something as minuscule as somebody wanting to drain a ditch off their property, this is what causes people headaches. And they don't want to deal with this anymore, but we're sadly going back in that direction. So, more red tape, more delays, more costs, less development, and capital flight is leaving. Mr. Speaker, some of the changes that we made, and I was proud to be part of that. As a matter of fact, I was even the legislative chair of the Subcommittee of Finance that brought in Bill C-38. There were common sense changes. I remember bizarre stories, Mr. Speaker, coming out of Manitoba, where a farmer who, after the Assiniboine and Red River floods, was charged for draining his field because the carp that had escaped the river during the flood and were in the field, because he was draining his field, and the carp, and thereby taking away the fish habitat that the fish were living in on his cornfield or his wheat field, got charged for destroying fish habitat. This is how bizarre the implementation of the legislation was before, and this is the legislation that we're going back to. So we can count on a whip vote on the other side, making sure that this legislation goes through, and we're going to be able to count on really bizarre stories like this coming forward again. We don't need to go back to legislation from the 1940s and 50s in this modern area. Counties and municipal districts are far more knowledgeable, far more responsible. There's far more education that's happened out there. There's far more oversight. We have social media oversight. We have all kinds of mechanisms right now to make sure not a single county wants to end up on the front page of a paper or anything like that after doing something wrong to harm fish habitat. And that's the problem with the legislation. The legislation right now is not just focused on fish habitat, but focused on if you harm even one fish. Now, if it happens, that's unfortunate. I get that. But if we're going to put that first and not look at the big picture of what we're actually trying to do, and we focus on something as minuscule as one fish, and we're going to stop an entire project because if we don't have all of the approvals in place, it doesn't matter what the methodology is going to be. The methodology will be the same. There's only so many ways to replace a bridge. There's only so many ways to replace a culvert. These things are well known. People are going to do them. But if we don't have all of the paperwork in place, you're going to be a criminal for doing it if you happen to kill a fish, notwithstanding the fact that the habitat was fine, all of the process was followed, all of the offsets and restoration guidelines have been followed. Mr. Speaker, this is the problem with this legislation. Now, there was a great opportunity for this government to actually go in a positive direction, to send an actual positive message to the investment community that says that we can actually get the balance between, they tout that they can get the balance between the environment and the economy right. They got it right from their perspective. No economy, all environment, and that's the problem. They could have focused on natural fisheries sustainability. That's one of the areas that they could have focused on. They talk about implementing the Cohen report. There's a clause, there's things in the Cohen report that they're simply not going to do because they don't want to simply focus on natural fisheries and sustainability. Fisheries enhancement and both in saltwater and in freshwater. We had the I know my colleague from Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa, and I, and several other members in the past, advocated in past budgets for fisheries programs where we partner with through these organizations to enhance freshwater fisheries. Why aren't we asking organizations or companies like Shell and so on, instead of rebuilding lakes in northern Alberta where mining projects are, use the same offsets and enhance fisheries where the actual people are, so people can enjoy those enhancements instead of restore the disturbed area to what it was, but do the enhancements where the people are. Make the fishing opportunities better, Mr. Speaker. There's a real sad situation here, a real missed opportunity in this bill to actually be progressive going forward, looking after not only fisheries and fisheries habitat, but looking after the people who sustain them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Burnaby North Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his speech. He obviously has a lot of experience in this area. Listening to his speech, though, I was somewhat confused because a lot of the stories and problems that he was telling throughout his speech are actually things that are being addressed in this legislation. The reason I know that is because our government consulted broadly across the country with industry, fishers, Indigenous people to make sure that this legislation not only went forward to protect our environment, but made sure that it had provisions so that we had better certainty for big projects, while including things like codes of practice for small projects. So I'd like to ask the member opposite, A, did he read the legislation? And B, if he did, his thoughts on the code of practice provisions.
Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, those codes of practice that are currently in place were put in place by the previous government, and there was no need to actually change them. The entire campaign that this member and all of his colleagues ran on was based on falsehoods and misinformation to the public about what the changes in the Fisheries Act of 2012 were all about. And if he doesn't believe me, if he wants to waltz around this issue, I'll give him a waltz. One step forward, two steps back. I didn't say that, Mr. Speaker. That's a statement by the Canadian Electricity Association on Bill C-68. One step forward, two steps back. SIA is particularly concerned that the government has chosen to return to pre-2012 provisions of the Fisheries Act that address activity other than fishing that results in the death of a fish. Not my words, Mr. Speaker. These are job creators and employers that are actually helping pay down the debt that the honourable member keeps voting in favour of increasing.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Kootenay-Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in 2015, one of the reasons my riding of Kootenay-Columbia changed hands from being Conservative for 21 years to being NDP is because of the Conservatives' attack on the environment, including removing the habitat section from the Fisheries Act. You know, I was a regional manager with Ministry of Environment for southeastern BC for a number of years, and we worked very closely with Fed Fish. And I can tell you that literally hundreds and thousands of actions by Fed Fish across Canada helped protect fish habitat and fish. And I know my colleagues in the Conservative Party like to talk about a ditch in Abbotsford and the flood in Manitoba. And absolutely, I think the officers that acted in those particular circumstances were not using their best discretion. But would he not agree that thousands of actions that protect habitat really should be the primary focus rather than the handful of perhaps poor decisions made by individual officers?
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
My honourable colleague asked me an actually very forthright question. I appreciate the question. If he wants to talk about thousands of actions, where is the litany of all of the reasons that this legislation needs to be changed in the first place? He's got none. Since the changes in legislation in 2012, there's been no massive event where there's been a massive fish loss. There's been nobody dumping chemicals, massive amounts into our rivers or into our waterways. None of these things are actually happening. There is actually no substantiated case anywhere in Canada that anybody can point to convince me that any legislative change actually needs to happen. This is all a campaign. These are changes that are made on a campaign of fear and misinformation about the responsible changes that the previous government made so that we could ensure that rural communities actually had hope for their future, because this is where everything comes from. You take a look around this room. Where did everything in this room come from? Where did the food come from that's outside on the table? Where did it all come from? It came from rural areas in our country, Mr. Speaker. And the more that we put onerous legislation like this in place, the harder we make it for the lives of those people living there.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa. We have about 30 seconds for the question, 30 seconds for the answer.
The Environment Committee right now is looking at the Liberals' proposed environmental assessment bill, and we had a number of representatives from various industries. The Canadian Energy Pipeline Association called the regulatory state in Canada right now, it's a toxic regulatory environment. He used the word toxic. And that's why investment in the mining industry, for example, is down 60%. The Fisheries Act is being layered on top of regulation after process after process after regulation. Investment is fleeing this country, and the changes that this government is making to the Fisheries Act are a big part of that. Could my friend from Red Deer Lacombe comment on that?
Honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe in 30 seconds or less, please.
My colleague from Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa is absolutely 100% correct. He has forgotten more about fisheries and the environment than the collective wisdom of this House will probably have ever known. We should be listening when this man speaks, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Cowichan Malahat Langford. He has about 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am proud to rise in this House as a representative of a rural community on British Columbia's coast on Vancouver Island, and I can tell you with all honesty, Mr. Speaker, that my constituents in the rural communities of my riding are very happy with this bill. They're very happy to see these provisions reinstated. In the short time that I have, Mr. Speaker, I want to concentrate on one aspect of the bill that I think needs some amendment at committee, and that has to deal with the need for legal protection for environmental flows, which is the amount and type of water needed for fish and aquatic ecosystems to flourish. Now, I've presented many petitions in this House to deal with the weir at Lake Cowichan, which controls the flow rates in the Cowichan River, and it's a particularly important piece of infrastructure, especially during July and August when the flow rates are very low, endangering fish and fish habitat. And when I presented petitions, the government's response acknowledged that summer low flows in the Cowichan River are a threat to fish and habitat, and that raising the Cowichan Weir could provide additional water storage in the lake to deal with the problem. So the government acknowledges that low flows are a danger to fish habitat, but we do not see the explicit protection in this legislation that I think is needed to protect those flow rates. And it's not only in the Cowichan River, Mr. Speaker. On the west coast of my riding, I should say the southwest coast, in the Jordan River, a river which has been decimated by an old copper mine, by BC Hydro dams, has seen its fish population absolutely wiped out. But, Mr. Speaker, when they opened up the reservoir and increased the flow rates, magically they had the salmon return, and that's all it took. It needed an increased flow rate to dilute the copper that's in the water, to give the fish colder temperatures because they have a narrow bandwidth of temperatures in which they can survive. And also, Mr. Speaker, if you have those protections for flow rates, it would oblige the government to live up to its obligations to put those funds in to make sure that we have the infrastructure to control flow rates. It would allow tributaries of these rivers to act as important breeding grounds for salmon. I see my time is up, Mr. Speaker. I'm thankful for this small opportunity to comment on this bill, and I look forward, on behalf of the great residents of Cowichan Malahat Langford, to supporting it when the vote comes. Thank you.
It being 1:15, pursuant to order made Monday, March 26, 2018, it is my duty to interrupt the proceedings and to put forthwith every question necessary to dispose of the second stage of the bill now before the House. The question is as follows. Monsieur Leblanc, appuyé par
Mr. Leblanc, seconded by Mr. Baines, moves that Bill C-68, an act to amend the Fisheries Act and other acts in consequence, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion?
All those in favour of the motion, please say yea. Yea! All those opposed, please say nay. I believe the yeas have it. Okay. Pursuant to Standing Order 45, the Recorded Division stands deferred until Monday, April 16th, 2018, at the ordinary hour of daily adjournment. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I suspect if you were to canvass the House, you would find unanimous support to call it 1:30 at this time so we could begin private members' hour.
Do we have unanimous consent to see the clock at 1:30? Did you want me to ask this again? Do we have unanimous consent to see the House, the clock at 1:30? I think somebody sneezed. The House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members' business, consideration at the report stage of Bill C-374, an act to amend the Historic Sites and Monuments Act, composition of the board in the name of Mr. Aldag.
Comme il n'y a aucune motion à l'étape.
As there is no motion at report stage, the House will now proceed without debate to putting of the question on the motion to concur in the bill at report stage. Mr. Aldag, seconded by Ms. Schultz, moves that Bill C-374,
Sites and Monuments Act, composition of the board, be concurred in at the report stage. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes. No. All those in favor of the motion, please say yay. Yay! All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the recorded division stands deferred until Wednesday, April 18th, 2018, immediately before the time provided for private members' business. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until Monday, April 16, 2018, at 11 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 28.2 and 24.1.